Welcome in to Check the Mic. Steve Palazzolo, Sam Monson. We're live on YouTube. It is Monday morning. Time for our Week 2 NFL review, Sam.
Yeah, that intro comes on you fast. It's not as lengthy as the old one.
It is quick, right? They give us a little,
Right
hey, we're going to be going live. Usually, you get the cobwebs out, shake it out, boom, you're just going. We're
no
here.
time for that these
we're
days.
Live. As always, if you're new here, we're going game by game. We don't know how long it's going to take, but we're going to be here covering every single game from Week 2. As always, a lot to discuss, Sam. We had our instant reaction on the YouTube channel last night. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so. Because we've got, the subscriber to listener ratio, subscriber to viewer ratio is really good, which means a lot more people have to click that subscribe button and the old thumbs up button, which helps the show.
Subscriber to listener ratio. The late Austin Gale, now of The Ringer, would turn that into an acronym somehow.
Yeah, if we can get that acronymized
Slur.
somehow, yeah.
He just hit that and assume you'd know what it means.
So it's really good. We have a lot of viewers for what we should get based off subscribers, which means people are just lazy.
Okay.
They haven't hit the subscribe button.
It's an unconventional strategy, calling the listeners lazy.
I love our listeners and viewers. All right, let's talk some football here. We always have to touch on Thursday night a little bit. We already talked a lot about it on the YouTube channel. So if you're in podcast land, again, you should also make your way to YouTube because we cover all of these primetime games right after they end. Thursday night and Monday night in particular. Sunday nights in between, before Sunday Night Football. The big story coming out of Bills 31, Dolphins 10. Bills moved to 2-0. Tua Tagovailoa with a concussion and all sorts of questions, swirling as far as his future. Fourth concussion, most likely, over the last 2 years for Tua.
Yeah, it's a difficult one to kind of recap because obviously the biggest takeaway for anybody is Tua, his future, what it all means. It's almost like incidental that, oh yeah, and by the way, the Bills were destroying Miami and they looked really good and they're now 2-0 and, a lot of good things from their perspective. Meanwhile, Miami has kind of struggled for 2 straight weeks, but none of that may matter if Tua is down long-term / permanently. If, the clamor for him to retire is something that they act on or that he acts on. So there's kind of the two halves, right? The football half and then the Tua personal story and his concussion history and all that kind of stuff. We, as you said, we covered it both initially in the live reaction and then you afterwards with a sort of dedicated video focusing on Tua and his concussion history and what it all means. Ultimately, I think Mike McDaniel said it the best, like the speculation either way doesn't help, right?
Yep.
Either way, you're making it worse because either you're reinforcing what he thinks and should do, in which case you just, that's making it harder for him to process, or it's the opposite of what he wants to do or should do, and you're making it harder for him to, just do what he needs to do. Either way, I think it's pretty clear they need to sit him down for some extended period of time because of how many concussions we've had in such a relatively short period of time. But I think other sports have shown that doesn't necessarily mean he needs to retire. I know that's the obvious thing that everyone's saying. He's got to hang it up. I don't know that that's necessarily the true outcome of what needs to happen. Clearly, he needs to be shut down, and his safety is paramount. But I think given the appropriate length of time, which may be the entirety of this season, right? I don't think it necessarily follows that he needs to be done with football.
Yeah, I think people bring that up because of the uncomfortable nature as the viewer watching it, right? Nobody likes seeing this thing, but now you're kind of projecting your own feelings.
It's also
what
very unknown.
do.
The whole thing is unknown, right?
Of course.
So, I had somebody tweeting at me, and they sort of tweeted a study that showed, that one of those Boston University studies that was, all these numbers of brain injuries in football players. Well, that's an argument for everybody to quit football, not for Tua specifically. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, if you want to follow this to its logical conclusion, football causes brain injuries. Therefore, don't play football is your logical loop in all this. Tua specifically has obviously dealt with multiple serious brain injuries, but so have other players in other sports and, returned to play and not been plagued by concussions for the rest of their career. It doesn't necessarily follow that he is, uniquely at risk relative to the broader football playing population. So, if you're hyper concerned about anybody's brain health, you say, hang it up, it's not worth it. I don't know that medically it's necessarily the obvious conclusion from Tua's history that he just needs to quit the game, as opposed to sit him down for an entire season. He can come back next year and not be at a significantly higher risk of further concussions, relative to any other quarterback.
So, as we said, had a good discussion on the YouTube channel here with Dr. Jess Flynn. Again, there'll be some YouTube exclusive content that we're able to put out there. We just have more flexibility on that channel than we do on the audio feed. So again, we try to be able to live in both places if you're a subscriber, and we appreciate those that are. As far as the game goes, just want to reinforce the Bills looking good through 2 weeks. At week 1 it was like, oh no, they didn't dominate the Arizona Cardinals all the way through. Well, we just saw what the Cardinals did. That win now looks more impressive.
Yeah.
The Bills, there is something to the matchup with the Miami Dolphins where they do play better. Before Tua got hurt, he wasn't playing well. Some bad decisions, picks in there. It was one of those games where the Bills, every year they have some of these games where it's like a full team effort, and I'm over here applauding like, hey, when Josh Allen only needs to throw the ball 19 times and he doesn't have to go and pick up 4 first downs with his legs, it's a good sign, I think, for the future for the Bills. And this was one of those. Good defensive effort, a couple big runs in there. James Cook with a 49-yard touchdown. So the Bills just looked really good all around, and they didn't even target any outside receivers. And this story that we brought up this offseason, Keon Coleman and replacing Stephon Diggs. It's all their yak guys, their middle of the field guys, and just winning in all different ways in Buffalo.
Yeah, that's one of those things where you can look at it either way, right? You can look at it as a negative and say, okay, they don't have any outside wide receivers at the moment, and at some point that's going to be a problem. Or you can look at it and say, they managed to win a game comfortably without having any outside wide receivers. Like, this is how good the rest of this team is. I'm kind of on the fence as to which way that's going to come down over the course of the year. Buffalo's one of those teams, like San Francisco, like Kansas City, where when you're talking about them in those terms, you're analyzing like Super Bowl as opposed to, regular season. Like, is it a problem versus most teams in the regular season? Probably not. But when you're asking if it's a problem, you're like, is that going to keep them from winning games in January and February is the real point. And that, I think, is less clear. The other important thing, I think, from a Miami perspective, though, it's obviously different with Tua's situation now, is we talk all the time about the speed that they have, the incredible playmakers, but the second they had to throw to anybody that wasn't one of the normal starters, they threw an interception, basically. Yeah. Like, every time the target was a guy that's not normally a staple of the offense, it was a miscommunication.
Grant Dubose, who had only been there a few weeks, and Robbie Chosen, who was just activated, the former Robbie Anderson, who was just activated before the game.
Yeah.
Never thought I'd say this, but they miss River Craycraft.
Yeah.
And Braxton Berrios.
Right.
They're dependable number 3s.
Yeah, I don't know if that was just a freak incident that, like, 2 of those happened in the one game. But basically, it was like anytime they threw to somebody that wasn't Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, the normal staple of people, they were on a different page with the quarterback.
I mean, if Tua hadn't gotten hurt the way he did, we would be talking about, oh boy, here we go again. Dolphins can't beat good teams.
Yeah.
They snuck through the Jags in week 1, and they're sitting here now at 1-1. And, can't get over the hump. They can't beat the Bills. Probably can't beat these best teams in the AFC. What's going on? Are they ever going to do it? More to talk about with the Dolphins, but disappointing effort for them, I would say, on Thursday Night Football.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, the game was going disappointingly anyway, and then it became a complete disaster with Tua's concussion, and now their entire – now it's literally like an existential crisis for the Miami Dolphins. They are probably stuck with Skylar Thompson for the foreseeable, and they have no idea how long the foreseeable is, and could in fact be, the new reality. Like, Tua might be retiring at the end of this.
Yeah, I was mostly joking about the Braxton Berrios thing. Just Braxton Berrios or River Craycraft. Always felt like Miami should have a better third option to really put that offense, at the next level there. Anything else on Thursday Night Football?
Von Miller looks like Von Miller again for the first time in a while. He felt like almost only on the roster because his contract would have been so onerous to cut loose. They might as well keep him and see, if they can get anything out of him. I mean, he looks like he was destroying Austin Jackson, who, remember, we just got busy saying Austin Jackson was amazing week 1. Like, he dominated Trayvon Walker outside of that one play where Walker ran him over. And then week 2, he could barely lay a hand on Von Miller. It's just absolutely annihilating him.
If Vaughn is back with Rousseau on that defensive line, Ed Oliver making some big plays Thursday night as well. That's a big development.
I saw somebody tweeting, like, after that game, they should just put Von Miller in bubble wrap and break him out again in January. Like, don't even forget it. You're done. You're good. Awesome.
Or you just literally roll them out for Chiefs games and just
like,
a couple games a year.
Just stay ready, because we're going to need you later on, but not now. We don't need you for the next few months.
Honestly, with the 17-game schedule, there's something to it.
Yeah.
All right, I got no more use for this game. Let's go to Sunday. They did it to us, Sam. The 10 games at 1 p.m.
Yeah.
10 games at 1 p.m. I try to go double multi-view, so you got 4 and 4. I got iPad and computer monitor.
You sent me your setup. You did, in fact, manage to have all 10 games up on a screen relatively in front of you, which was quite impressive. I don't, however, think that simply having the game on a screen in front of you is the limiting factor when you're trying to watch 10 games at once.
It's the attention span.
Yeah.
Certainly
the
attention
it's
span.
simply your brain's capacity to take in 10 streams of information at one time.
Even more distracting, I would just yell, be like, oh no, oh wow, look at this. And Harry's like, I thought you were what game you talking about, Dad? And then I got to explain it,
So I feel like the 10 game in one window thing is built for people who are not trying to take information in on all 10 games.
But we somehow did it between yesterday and today. So we're going to start with the Washington Commanders getting their first win of the season, 21-18 over the New York Giants. Commanders move to 1-1. Giants fall to 0-2. Austin Seibert, 7 field goals in this game. There's all sorts of just fun stats.
Which is not an NFL record, by the way.
What, the 7?
Yeah. 8 is the record.
Yeah, somebody had 8. Who was that?
I don't remember who it was, but it was, I don't remember.
Literally every Commanders drive finished with a field goal, except when they took a knee before the half.
Yeah.
This was also, I'll pull out this. There was some fun stats in this one, some fun reaction. What was your initial reaction on this game?
The most fun of the stats to come from this game to me was that Malik Neighbors finished with a target share of 67%. Like 30-something% is a high target share. He basically doubled a high target share. The offense was Malik Neighbors. The end. Like, that's it. You throw the ball at Malik Neighbors, and if that doesn't work, we're out of ideas.
There were a lot of games this week where one or two receivers, but in particular one, like Hunter Henry in New England had a big chunk of. But Malik Neighbors with 127 of the 178 receiving yards for the New York Giants. But then he had the key drop. He was targeted 18 times per NFL. NFL Jesus, that's GSIS. The drop, though, late in the game ends up becoming a huge play for the Giants. Like, the Giants just finding a way to lose this game. But they did a good job freeing Neighbors up on those crossers and giving him room to run. I mean, he looked like the explosive playmaker that we expected out of LSU.
Yeah. And
I want to give Brian Daboll credit for that as well. It was like, hey, when you have this toy to play with, and the press asked him this week, how do you get the ball to Malik Neighbors? He said, throw the ball to him. All right. And they did it. And we talked about this a little bit on the show at one point, right? Where they said, you flip over the play card and Daboll's got like a player-driven, like the Ask Madden for the player. It looked like they flipped the card over and they had those plays from Malik Neighbors. They did a good job freeing him up and using his skill set.
It's funny. It's like it shows sort of how important like you can be a wide receiver, you can be the offense, right? Basically everything's going through Malik Neighbors, and then one play, fourth down,
and
don't
4.
make that one. That's your game.
So Giants were working without a kicker.
Yeah. So they late in the game,
kicker injury, so they had to go for 2 early on.
Right. They tied it essentially, and then obviously you kick the extra point to actually go ahead. Only they didn't have a kicker, so they had to go for 2. Didn't get it. It's still a tie game. And then late in the game, you can't go for the kick to win because you don't have a kicker. So you're trying to convert in fourth down. They actually get in position. Like, ironically, Daniel Jones makes the play, right? He starts moving from the pocket. It's against cover 2. He fires a ball past the cover 2 corner, who's supposed to be taking that away. Like, that's supposed to be covered. Jones gets the ball there to Neighbors on the sideline, who's adjusted, got himself into space. It's a first down, and Neighbors can't make the catch while he's keeping his feet in at the sideline. Game.
And so the Neighbors play, right? Like you said, they're in field goal range. They would have had a chance at the go-ahead field goal late in the game. Commanders come back on their game-winning drive. Jaden Daniels hits Noah Brown on the big in, as our friend Bruce Gradkowski used to say.
The big in.
The big in, the big dig route to Noah Brown to get into Giants territory. And Jaden Daniels, I thought he had the keeper to get them deep into the red zone that essentially sealed the game for them, put them into a really close field goal range essentially for the game winner. Incredible burst on his keeper to get to the edge, to get the first down. Commanders get their 7th field goal. Tom Palazzolo says Austin Siebert was 1 week ago, was watching NFL games on TV today, just like us.
Yeah.
He probably had the 8-box mix, a couple TVs, had multi-views going, but yesterday kicked 7 field goals, including the game winner, getting carried off the field by his new Commanders teammates.
Yeah, we didn't do that.
Football, Tom finishes it with.
Yeah.
Exclamation point. And then I got to find the other tweet. This was the first game. I love when history is made. History was made. First off, Josh Norris, our friend Josh Norris from Underdog, commented on it. Incredible stat. The Giants scored 3 touchdowns. Commanders didn't score a single touchdown, went 0 for 6 in terms of touchdowns in the red zone, and the Giants still lost. Commanders still won. And then I saw a tweet somewhere else that basically said that's the only time in NFL history that's ever happened. A team that didn't score a touchdown, gave up 3, won the football game.
It's funny that, so now that they've moved the extra point back and it's actually a serious kick as opposed to the gimme play from previously, you can't just I wonder if
the Ndamukong Suh, Wes Welker come in.
In a previous world where the chip shot extra point, would you still take a shot with just anybody, right? Because it's right in front of the goalposts. Anyone that can vaguely kick a ball should be able to make an extra point from that distance. Instead, it's now moved back. And you're without a kicker, we actually can't really attempt that kick. We've got to go for 2, particularly because going for 2 it's a pretty high percentage play, right? It's like a coin flip. You've got a reasonable shot of converting it versus somebody random trying to attempt a decent length field goal. It does kind of change the math on that stuff. Jaden Daniels' second straight game where he just looks so dynamic as a runner, not so much necessarily as a passer yet. And then second straight, really good Brian Robinson Jr. game. I mean, he's looked fantastic through 2 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, what the Commanders are able to do on the ground is pretty impressive. Obviously, when we're sitting here on a Monday morning, Sam, you've got these big picture things like this unit played well, this player played well, and then you have these granular week-to-week things. Like if Washington blew this game, we'd be sitting here lamenting their inability to win in the red zone. If the Giants won this game, we'd be talking about, man, they just, they gave up some yards, but they cracked down in the red zone. But high level, some run game to build around with Washington. Jaden Daniels, I don't think he looks terrible as a passer. Not great. I mean, he's okay so far. From the Giants' perspective, there were some good things in there. Washington just kept, every time they got in the tight red zone, penalties, they just disaster plays. And I don't want to say they're lucky to win it, but yeah, it's the only game in history where they didn't, a team didn't score a touchdown, gave up 3.
Characterize it how you want. It's unusual for a team that is that kind of output to win the game.
So especially in week 2, where, the entire league's either 0-2, 2-0, or 1-1, right? And it's if you're on the extremes there, it feels either great or it feels like, oh man, this season's a disaster. I'm trying not to overreact either way here. This is a pretty even game between the Giants and the Commanders, and it comes down to a Malik Neighbors drop, unfortunately, after he had a great game, and the Commanders just continuing to move the ball and kicking the field goals when they needed them.
Yep. You do feel like the Giants need to discover at least some sort of secondary receiving option. You can't.
Oh, for sure.
67% is absurd as a target share. Somebody needs to see the ball more often than that.
They do. Jones was okay after, a rough week. I mean, you still have this, 6.4 yards per attempt. It's not an explosive passing attack. It is when you're targeting Neighbors for the most part. Neighbors was wide open for a touchdown over the middle. Nice throw by Jones to Wan'Dale Robinson in the flat for one of the touchdowns. Devin Singletary ran well, but he also fumbled in Commanders territory. So, like, again, from a Giants perspective, missed opportunities. Fumble in Commanders territory, the Neighbors drop, and, not having a kicker. Daboll was asked about not having a backup kicker because there was a hamstring injury coming in, I'll be honest. Well, I don't keep up with special teams depth chart changes a whole lot, but ended up being a pretty big point in the game.
Your blind spot comes back to haunt you.
My blind spot, keeping up with those changes. Anything else on Giants Commanders?
No, I think that's that game.
That's that game.
It's that game.
21-18, Commanders Giants. All right, let's go Jets and Titans. Jets get their first win of the season, 24-17. Over the Tennessee Titans. Aaron Rodgers, first win as a New York Jet.
No, as he specifically corrected somebody. Technically the second. He gets credit.
It's really obnoxious, all right? If you're going to track QB wins, which I believe is a stat. It's a stat.
Oh, yeah?
Yes.
Okay.
Now that I left PFF, all of a sudden, boom, it's a stat.
All of a sudden wins are a QB stat?
No. QB wins are a stat.
Okay.
They are a stat that are real.
Yeah.
We should at least track them properly. We should at least track them the same way Major League Baseball tracks pitcher wins. Okay? Now, pitcher wins in baseball, also a stat. Not a great one, but they're a stat. QB wins are a stat, and they're not good for one-game samples, certainly. They're not great for season samples, but over time, they're real. So Aaron Rodgers having 4 snaps and then a snap of his Achilles.
And a W.
And calling that a win because they had a walk-off overtime. It's just he should get a no decision.
A no decision.
It's called a no decision, Sam. He should get a no decision in that game, week 1 last year. Zach Wilson came in relief and got the win. As a reliever, had a lot of wins. Had 9 wins one year. You vulture some wins. You blow a lead. Then your team takes the lead, and you get the win. That's what you do.
Right.
Had 9 wins one year. I deserve credit as the relief pitcher. So I'm calling this the first win for Aaron Rodgers as a New York Jet.
All right.
What?
Nothing.
It's too early for these tangents. We'll talk about Will Levis in a minute, but what'd you make of the Jets?
I mean, they were better. It's the second week in a row where I've been very impressed by Tennessee, absent Will Levis having a complete and total meltdown and kind of like being the difference that the game went the other way. The Jets were better. They had, different threats this week. Like Breece Hall had a really nice touchdown, which apparently he'd called for. I couldn't. Busy trying to keep track of 10 games. I couldn't.
He called his own wheel route?
Yeah, well, I couldn't determine whether that was something he'd been calling for like in the week prior to the game or like during the game. Hey, if I'm covered by this linebacker, give me a chance. Either way, at some point he'd sort of indicated to Rodgers, throw the ball at me if I'm covered by Kenneth Murray, which is a reasonable point to be making if you're Breece Hall. And he did. Really nice touchdown catch from him. Braylon Allen, the rookie, looks really good in the NFL.
You shouldn't have written him off so early last year.
He looks like a different player in the NFL. It's actually remarkable, the difference in his tape. His explosiveness is phenomenal. Apparently, Robert Saleh pointed out, he's the youngest player to score an NFL touchdown since 1950.
I did not know that.
And he scored 2 of them, right? I'm amazed by how good he looks. Like, I thought he was the second best running back they drafted, let alone in the draft class. And he looks like a completely different player in the NFL, just way more explosive, way more decisive, and has a better understanding of how to use his frame, which has always been huge and fantastic. Like, he's way more direct at this level, and it's already resulted in several positive impact plays for them.
Braylon Allen with a receiving touchdown on that little shovel pass from Aaron Rodgers, and then had the game-winning touchdown, 20 yards, where, like as you said, got to the edge and showed a little bit of burst,
right?
Which was pretty good given his size. I thought the Jets offense, they look okay. Like Aaron Rodgers finishes 18 of 30 for 176. 2 touchdowns again. One of them was a shovel pass. One of them was that nice wheel route to Breece Hall. It feels a little disjointed for the Jets. Like Rodgers will just kind of broke out a couple big time throws, a couple chunk plays down the field, but then there's just a lot of down inconsistency for this offense, but they got the pieces, I think, to be solid.
Well, the Jets right now seem like the kind of best case study for just this league-wide struggle on offense. Like, they look like the best sort of average of, yeah, it's going okay, but it's 100 yards less than you would have expected last year with similar, weapons and tools and the whole situation. Like, if you take this offense, transport it back a year or two, you would expect 100 more yards of offense in a given game, and yet it's not happening yet. And I don't know if that's just, this is effectively Rodgers' second game with them, or if this is the dynamic of this year's NFL. Defense is ahead for the first time in years.
I didn't check yesterday's number. Offense felt better yesterday. I don't know if the numbers back that up, but felt better at least than week one.
Still sort of way below. Maybe not. It still felt like significantly below baseline for the last several years, at least in a number of spots. Like, there were definitely, we got a couple, right? 2 or 3 300-yard guys, but after that, there's still a bunch there's still a bunch of $150 passing attempts that just you don't see in previous years.
On the other hand, a week after Will Levis throws the game away while in the grasp, throwing a pick six in week one, we got head coach Brian Callahan talking about one of the decisions Will Levis made yesterday.
What did you say to Will on the fumble? I know you looked very upset on the sideline.
I think the camera caught it pretty clear, if I had to guess. So, I was upset. It was dumb. It was the same exact thing he did last week, and he cost us points in the red zone. And that is what it is. He's a grown-up, and he knows better. And so, I was really irritated that he cost us 3 points in a game that we probably needed it.
Yeah, it couldn't have been more perfect that the camera then cut to him, and you did get a good read of exactly what he said to Will Levis. We were saying before we came on, Callahan there says the exact same thing he did last week. It's actually not. And critically, there were 2 ways that he could have made it worse last week, right? The only 2 ways that the play he did a week ago could have been worse were if it was in the red zone, and if he, instead of throwing it forwards, where if it's not caught, it's incomplete, if you throw it backwards so that whatever happens, it's live. He managed to do both of those on this play. That is impressive. Like, after a week, last week, where, okay, you did this twice. It was crazy both times. Come on now. You know better than that. Let's rein it in. He found the only 2 ways possible to make a worse play and did it right in front of his coach.
It's just massive plays, man. These are, and it wasn't the only stuff that happened with Levis. He also had, so that play is just, how do you keep doing that?
I mean, that's just
how do you do it again? Because that they talked about it this week. They sat down. Will, just take care of, just live to play another day. And then situational football-wise, when you're in the red zone, you're literally taking 3 points off. They're in the deep in the red zone. You're literally taking, a likely 3 points off the board in that situation.
Yeah.
Throwing the ball back.
It was just an absolute maniac play of the Will Levis archetype. The thing is, so the pocket is slightly collapsing in on him, right? But like last week, remember we were talking about his pocket movement is so, over the top. There's a little bit of pressure coming from the right side, and he just violently lurches in the opposite direction, way more than you need to, right? And that's what's causing him problems as much as anything else. It's like his own overreaction to what's happening around him. So this one, the pocket is collapsing around in on him, and then the gap between left tackle and left guard actually opens up quite nicely for him to escape and make a play. And when you watch the TV view, you're like, oh, it's actually a really tight thing. It sort of trips him on his way out. But it wasn't. It was like a big gap. Only his movement away from the pressure caused him to trip himself over his left tackle. And that's how he ends up, now I'm going to be horizontal here and fall over. And that's where he decides, you know what, the best course of action to avoid falling over here is to lateral the ball to the running back while I'm horizontal in midair. But again, it's like he's the architect of his own demise. If he just didn't overreact to the pressure, he could have actually escaped through the wide open B gap and been able to have a positive play, or at least a play where he was actually relatively comfortable in open space to make a decision.
The other part that I found funny, because we've always made the Jameis comp for Will Levis. What is Jameis? the peak of volatility, both good and bad, the peak of my favorite Jameis game, one of the maybe the favorite like segments we've ever done together, working together, was the back-to-back weeks where Jameis threw passes while falling over. Right? I mean, it's kind of like this Levis thing.
Yeah.
Now, Jameis had a balancing act to what he did. So in back-to-back weeks, I think it was 2021, he had a touchdown pass while falling over. He was falling backwards. He threw it up and threw a touchdown. And then it was either before that or after that, he had another pass where he was falling backwards and he threw like a terrible pick in the red zone. And it's like, wow, it evened out.
It is.
Levis had the evening out effect yesterday as well, because he throws an interception where he chucks it out single coverage with a safety over the top, basically chucks it up into double coverage, has an interception, but he also had a touchdown to Calvin Ridley that put the Titans back to tie the game at 17 into double coverage, right? Single coverage with the safety over the top.
I still don't understand how that got through, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, statistically, it's going to look like Sauce Gardner's worst game of his career, I believe, because he was in coverage on that play to Ridley. I had no idea how it got through either, but it was not that much different. So that the interception was the same exact play, very similar play, as the touchdown. The interception gets picked, obviously, and the touchdown somehow sneaks through to Calvin Ridley. It's like the Seinfeld episode where Seinfeld, he always balances out, he evens out. This was Levis, his 2 throws into double coverage, 1 pick, 1 big touchdown.
Like, I thought that was picked off, and then it was when like, hang on, Ridley came
Ridley's
up with that ball. What the hell? How did that happen?
Celebrating.
I do wonder. So the analysis is always so outcome based, right? Like, obviously from a process standpoint, falling over and launching the ball backwards in the red zone is generally a catastrophic play. I do kind of wonder what the reaction would be if he'd completed it, right? If that ball was 2 feet higher and it actually got through to the running back, and it was, the running back would have been tackled pretty much immediately. It wouldn't have gone anywhere. But I do wonder if he makes that happen, what is the analysis of Levis on that play? Do we just brush over it and say, wow, that was a little bit risky,
no,
but we move on? Or are we still losing our minds? Because
go ahead.
Because with a lot of these quarterbacks, with Caleb Williams, with Josh Allen, with Patrick Mahomes, they're all operating outside of the conventional norm now, right? Like, they're all going full Brett Favre in terms of none of this is how we teach it. And what it comes down to is, what is your balance on these plays? Like, how many of them are you making versus screwing up is effectively what we're talking about here. For Mahomes, the ratio is like so far in the positive that you basically just say, it doesn't matter. Like, who cares? Every now and again, you're going to make a mistake, and we'll live with it because you're the best quarterback we've ever seen. Josh Allen is similarly in that, albeit a little bit more extreme. Josh Allen makes a lot of mistakes, but he makes so many positive plays that you just be like, whatever. And actually, the first year or so of Josh Allen looks a lot like Will Levis here, where it's like maniac plays. Like, what are you doing? And he found the balance. Like, he found enough positive plays to offset the negative. And to be fair, he's reined in the negative that aren't quite as crazy as they used to be. But it's all about the balance, right? Right now, Levis, the balance is almost all negative. Like, you're making almost none of these plays. Therefore, you need to stop making them. But if that's like, is it possible to improve his ratio of success to failure on the maniac plays? Or do you have to try and get the maniac out of him?
So I'm of the mind. By the way, he also had, his best throw was 3rd and 10 in the third quarter, puts the ball on Calvin Ridley's hands down the field, and Ridley dropped it. That should have been about a 45, 50-yard gain. That was his best throw of the game. Ridley makes up for it with the other touchdown. I'm of the mind that the result of the play kind of matters.
Well, it has to.
In those situations, right? So, like, when Mahomes makes a great throwaway, or a player, does this incredible thing to save a 10-yard sack and they throw it away, to me, those are all calculated risks. And at the end of the day, you give credit or blame for the calculation, right? So, like, we'll talk about Caleb Williams in about 3 hours. I feel like Caleb Williams is not calculating his NFL game speed right now. So when he's, juking and dancing around the pocket and doing all this stuff, he's not getting away with it because he's not making that calculation right now. Where Mahomes is the greatest, mental calculator of, I need 6 yards, I'm going to get 6, run just fast enough. I'm going to do just enough so that my knee doesn't hit and I'm going to throw it away, and I know where, and I've got spatial awareness and I know where people are. So I'm of the mind they're all calculated risk, and you do judge the results through the way we used to at PFF from a grading standpoint. If you throw it right to the defender and he drops it, the result isn't incomplete. The result is, turnover worthy, bad play. So that's where Levis is missing on some of these plays.
But the difficulty, I think, at the moment, so from a coaching point of view, is all of this is outside of the norm of coaching. It's like it's independent of what you're being taught to do in a given play. Like we talk about this with Shanahan and Brock Purdy a lot, right? There's the structure of the offense, and then there's what happens when the offense breaks down, and that's basically all on the quarterback. Like that's when he takes over. He's now the field general, and the coach is like a passenger on those plays, right? When it reaches a certain point, now the quarterback is driving the train, and you just have to sit back and hope he doesn't drive it off a cliff. That the problem is with all these quarterbacks, that this is the world we're in when they're in charge and the coach just has to wait and judge the outcome. So when you're the coach and you have one of these quarterbacks, I'm not sure what the strategy is, because obviously they need to get better on these plays, because right now the results for Levis are almost all negative, right? But because they're all outside of like your realm, like none of these are what Brian Callahan is drawing up, right? So how does he actually improve the ratio of success to failure? Can you like coach Levis to get better at the maniac plays, or do you have to try and get him to stop doing maniac plays? That's effectively my question.
I think there's a difference between, like I joked about the 2 heaves into double coverage, 1 pick, 1 touchdown. Keep going with those. I mean, stay with the aggressiveness there.
Because Allen has at least one of those plays on his tape as well. I remember a play where Allen, again, into double coverage, it looked intercepted, and somehow the ball got through, and it's like, oh, that's actually, it ends up a great play, right? Genuinely, rookie Josh Allen looked quite a lot like Will Levis. And obviously, like Allen is going to be, everyone looking for the next Josh Allen, you're never going to find it. But right down to Wyoming tape is a mess. Giant physical tools, huge arm, big bodied guy.
Both had a better second to last year in college than final year.
And then rookie year is full of maniac plays that are absolutely ridiculous. And Allen pulled himself out of it, improved the ratio, got better, more successful at them, massively increased the number of positive plays he made, and generally increased his overall baseline of efficiency, et cetera, et cetera. I don't think you can look for the next Josh Allen. It's just not, you're not going to find, he's an outlier. That's not the normal pathway to anything. But if you were envisaging Levis becoming successful, the parallels with Josh Allen would be remarkable. Like if he did end up becoming a good NFL quarterback. So again, it's like, how do you, if you're Brian Callahan now and you're looking at this, right? We're in tape study this week. We've got 2 weeks of this where arguably the Titans should be 2-0, and Will Levis individually is responsible for that not being the case. But you're like,
I mean, maybe not in this game. I mean, they still could have lost this game.
It's a big part of it.
Certainly
Anyway,
in week 1.
Point being, I don't know what you do to that, because I don't think, like, I think if your approach to Josh Allen had been, I need you to stop making these plays, you're no longer dealing with Josh Allen. You're dealing with a completely different quarterback who doesn't make as many big plays because you've taken away his instinct to improvise and to do spectacular things. I don't know if you just have to look at Levis and say, until you pull yourself out of this, you can't play at this level.
I would just stop making the Josh Allen comparison, because his special, even early on, I think was at a different level.
Okay, but
he had it in whatever.
We've comped him to Jameis. Use Jameis as an example.
It's closer to Jameis, and
the balance for Jameis was the same, right? It's like eventually they just gave up and said, okay, the balance is too negative. You're no longer a starting quarterback. But that's what it's. My point being, it's all on the quarterback. Like the coach is basically just, I don't know what to do with this. None of this is my wheelhouse.
Yeah, I think you try to the late in the down plays, you try to rein in the general, like, hey, maybe this is a bit of a risky downfield throw. I think you want to keep that aggressive. We got to move on, Sam. But I want to touch on 2 things real quick for the Jets. Pass protection was outstanding here. First run PFF, which all part of your PFF Plus package, our friends over here at PFF. When this comes out, we'll see what the final tally is. But as of right now, 1 pressure allowed by the Jets offensive line. It was a sack on a Harold Landry stunt. So the Jets pass protection was outstanding. And then they got injured up front. Jermaine Johnson left the game on the edge rusher. We know Hassan Reddick is still holding out. They're thin on the edge. Your boy Will McDonald had to come in. He did have a sack. He is still not very good against the run. Jets have to come back on Thursday Night Football facing the Patriots, one of the most run-heavy teams in the NFL. Just something to keep an eye on coming out of this game for the Jets.
Yeah, Tennessee's run game had some success again against the Jets defense. I still don't quite understand why the split for Tony Pollard and Tajee Spears seems to be so heavily favored in Pollard's favor. Like, Spears was fantastic last year, splitting the backfield with Derrick Henry. And
because Pollard's still good too.
he's good, but he's for 2 straight weeks now, it's been like 2-1 in terms of Pollard's workload over Tajee Spears, when the Titans themselves were talking about them as interchangeable and 50-50.
I did expect more 50-50, maybe because they said it. But
Yeah, if you were leaning in any direction coming into the season, you would say Spears should be getting more workload than Pollard. And Pollard has like rejuvenated himself, shown that he's still a really good running back, but it shouldn't be coming at the expense of Spears. Like this, figure out a way of making that more balanced, because Spears should be on the field more than he is right now.
Somebody in the chat saying, Will McDonald, did he have 3 sacks? Did he have 3 by the NFL? I thought I saw 1 by PFF numbers. Did I miss something? He has 1 by PFF numbers and 3 by the NFL.
That would be impressive.
I don't know the difference there, but look into it. Anything else on this game?
He
Jets
does
tight.
have 3 by
He
the
has
NFL.
3 by the NFL and
How
1
does
by
that
PFF. I don't know what the differences are.
Yeah.
We had that discrepancy last week. Again, PFF usually matches the NFL in those types of plays, but they also keep their stats on their own. We'll look into it. We're not doing it right now.
Well, if that's one, okay, that's a sack from the Jets, and McDonald doesn't touch the quarterback, so
That's why, yeah, right. Like if it doesn't matter.
like he's just vaguely in the vicinity. That can't be one.
That's one where like PFF, if the QB slides or like gives himself up, they don't assign the tackle, whereas the NFL does.
No, this
That
is
was
like
what
just
happened.
somebody else making a play, and he just happens to be like a yard or so from the quarterback. I don't like.
Oh, good for
I'm just
Will.
looking at sacks, let alone.
Again, why the sack number is terrible. But I got no more use for this game, Sam.
All right.
Los Angeles Chargers, 26. Carolina Panthers, 3. Panthers have now been outscored a whole lot to 10. No, 13. It's a lot. It's just bad.
Yeah.
Chargers move to 2-0. Panthers fall to 0-2. A lot to discuss in this game. J.K. Dobbins, once again, 17 carries for 131 and a score. The running attack for the Chargers, over 200 yards. Justin Herbert, another game with his best J.J. McCarthy impersonation. Goes 14 of 20 for $130.
Jim Harbaugh must be so happy.
So
He's
thrilled.
just loving life.
So
and
thrilled.
now he's going to get a week of board
Think
games.
about it. He's saving some bullets in the old arm.
And now he gets to play board games all week. Guy's just living the dream.
Where do
right
they
now.
play next? So they're just staying on
They're
the East
East Coast again this week, so they're staying on the East Coast. I think they're staying in Carolina to then play in Pittsburgh.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Just, save the travel. Save the travel.
So Kosh Grunty, you don't want to
2 touchdowns for Quentin Johnston. And then Bryce Young finishes 18 of 26, which is fine, for 84 yards.
Less fine.
No touchdowns and a pick. Also got sacked a couple times for 15 yards, negative 15 yards.
Yeah.
Your thoughts on this game?
So we covered it a little bit yesterday in the instant reaction show. I feel like at this point you probably need to sit down Bryce Young for a few reasons. Number one, the offense right now is so bad, and yet it was supposed to be upgraded in every possible way in the offseason, right? The coaching got improved with Dave Canales coming over. The receivers are upgraded both in the draft and in a veteran capacity with Deontay Johnson, and the offensive line was upgraded. None of that is evident from watching the team so far, and there's no way of knowing if it was successful or not, because Bryce Young is so bad right now that you can't get enough. It's impossible to tell what anything else is doing, right? So I think you need to sit him down for a few weeks, put Andy Dalton in there just to establish a baseline of what this team is. Like imagine being the GM, you're Dan Morgan right now watching this team. you have no idea if anything you did this offseason made any sense, because I don't know if the receivers have been upgraded. I don't know if the offensive line is better. I don't know if the coaching scheme is working, because none of it's functioning. So put in Dalton. Let's establish a baseline of everything else, and then go back to Bryce Young. For number one, having established the baseline, you can get an idea of what is working, what isn't, and then try and construct a game plan around that. Number two, there's the vague hope that sitting him down for a couple of weeks will serve as some kind of hard reset for Bryce Young and maybe snap him out of his funk. Now, somebody asked me this on Twitter, like, can you think of an example where that's actually worked? And the answer is no, but I also can't think of too many examples where a guy has had this kind of start to his career and turned it back around anyway. So at this point, you have to be looking at this and saying the chances that Bryce Young becomes the guy from here in any possible pathway are basically zero. So you might as well do the thing that serves other parts of the offense for a while.
They're
and
slim.
then hope.
They're definitely slim. And the point I made last night was, last week the report came out that the New England Patriots were giving Drake May 30% of the first team reps.
Yeah.
The standard is the backup takes about 5% of the first team reps. And there's someone like Chase Daniel comes out, and he's a career backup, doesn't like this, right? He's like, oh, this is non-standard.
The live fact checker Ben Stockwell, the maniac Will Levis play goes down as a sack and a forced fumble for Will McDonald.
It did?
By the NFL, apparently.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Will Levis, yeah. Will McDonald, maybe a couple freebie sacks in there for you.
He doesn't even trip over. He trips over his own left tackle.
Someone has to get it.
Do they?
Sack totals, bad.
This is why that process is silly. You don't need to make the numbers add up.
That's why half sacks exist too, because they all have to add up.
Right.
Because if Levis is sacked 4 times, you have to have 4 sacks for the Jets.
That's a classic example of literally nobody caused that sack other than Levis. No defender should get credit for that sack.
Will McDonald gets it.
Yeah.
You should be happy. That's your guy.
Good for him.
Anyway, the Drake May example, I'm just bringing it up because someone like Chase Daniel is like, I've never seen this. Like, you're doing a disservice to Jacoby Brissett and both guys, and just other people are saying just play Drake May if he's getting all the reps. It's like, no, personally I love this because the whole Patriots organization depends on Drake May and his success. Right. So have a plan for Drake May, and no offense to Jacoby Brissett, but you're just kind of like, the second option that we're worried about here. Drake May is number 1. So now the Panthers are in a similar boat, where the first option is do what's best for Bryce Young. Because, it does look like a slim chance now that he comes out of this. So now you might have to think a little bit more creatively here and not just play him. And the other concern, so you have to think about, is it better to sit him for 3 or 4 weeks? Now, usually what we're talking about here coincides with, look, the situation's just bad for Bryce Young. Here's why it's worse right now. This is why the Bryce Young discourse is worse. Last year, we could kind of make those excuses, right? We could say, look, the offensive line's rough. Look, Adam Thielen's the only guy who can get open, and it's only against zone because he's kind of at the end of his career. I get it. Maybe the play calling's not great. Now, you got Canales in. You have some improvements at receiver, presumably. But more importantly, the pass protection's fine. He's really not under a whole lot of pressure. This is the best the Panthers' offensive line has looked in pass protection in years. That's the bigger concern for Bryce Young. They only gave up a handful of pressures yesterday against that Chargers defensive front. That's what makes it even worse for Bryce Young, because he looks, confidence is shot, everything is just worse than last year in a little bit better of a situation.
Yeah. The absolute worst thing that could happen if you bench him for a few weeks is that Andy Dalton actually wins a few games and takes you further away from the number 1 overall pick, right? I think that's worth doing to figure out whether you actually upgraded this roster at all in the offseason. And
I don't know if the number 1 pick matters this year
but
relative
to, But that's like the worst case. If you're looking at this and you're being like, this could be terrible. Like, what? This is an awful decision to bench him. What's the worst that could happen is Andy Dalton comes in and makes the point self-evidently that actually this team isn't bad, It's just the quarterback stinks, right? And I still think you put him back in because there's no point in playing Andy Dalton. He's not a long-term fix to anything. It's not helping your team if you win 6 games this year. So you might as well give Bryce Young the remainder of his tenure as a starter to see if he can pull back out of it. But that's the worst case, is actually Dalton's quite good and the offense is fine and Bryce Young is individually the problem. In which case, at least you know.
Now, all that said, we've talked a lot about Bryce Young. The rest of the Panthers have been awful, other than maybe their pass protection that I was just talking about. Still, they're one of the worst pass rushing teams in the NFL.
Yeah.
I think at the end of the weekend, again, when your PFF Plus stats come out, they'll be worst or second worst as a team pass rushing grade for this year. Run blocking's horrendous, right down there with the Broncos. Like, they don't actually do much well. They didn't stop the run well yesterday at all against the Chargers. They don't do much well. So it is more than a Bryce Young problem right now for the Panthers. But that's the biggest issue that needs to get resolved, because if he somehow gets on track someday, they're more competitive.
We know that there are more problems than Bryce Young, but the problem is we don't know how big and how many, right? And I think that's why you need Dalton to just play a couple of games to try and establish a better baseline for everything else. Yeah, the defense is problematic now, which is not helping. Like J.C. Horn had a weird game where he got torched by Quentin Johnson for that first touchdown. Really nice play by Quentin Johnson, the type that he doesn't make enough of either in college or at the NFL level, but it was a great play and a great touchdown over J.C. Horn, who himself, like, he got barbecued last week as well. And you're like, whew, J.C. Horn, maybe the injuries have really taken a toll on him, and he's not the same guy anymore. And then later in the game, he makes a spectacular interception on a Herbert forced throw of the type, ironically, that Herbert doesn't tend to make, which is why we sort of speculated before, maybe he is actually ideally suited for this Jim Harbaugh dream quarterback gig where he attempts 22 passes a week and completes, 19 or 20 of them, because Herbert is generally the best quarterback in the NFL at avoiding turnovers, at being turnover-worthy play averse. And yet, it makes it, now that he's playing in this glorified J.J. McCarthy role, he then actually forces one of those and an interception.
Yeah, I mean, Herbert didn't really play well in this game manager role yesterday. I thought it was a good throw to Quentin Johnston for that touchdown. Quentin Johnston having a contested catch touchdown, though. That was, not a great contested catch guy, but has the body for it. But Herbert had the bad interception to J.C. Horn that you mentioned. Also tried to do a little bit too much in the pocket, fumbled. He came out banged up as well in this game, I believe, right? Ankle. But yeah, it wasn't like Herbert played this clean game manager game. The stat line says it, but if, the Panthers weren't so bad offensively, we might be having a discussion about Herbert's game specifically, but he didn't have to do a whole lot. The story for the Chargers, though, run game for the second straight week, dominant up front. I mean, both lines for the Chargers. Dominant run defense overall, other than maybe a run or two by Chuba Hubbard. But once again, they're stout up front, destroying blocks, doing their thing. And then offensively, Joe Alt, shout out, the rookie right tackle, a ton of outstanding blocks. He looked so good through 2 weeks. I think the only blip for him, he lost a few reps to Christian Wilkins last week in the run game. But we're talking held his own in pass pro, as we talked about last week against Max Crosby. This week, huge part of the Chargers' run game, averaging over 200, getting over 200 yards again this week, along with J.K. Dobbins, showing his explosiveness again.
First time, J.K. Dobbins with 130 plus in each of the first 2 weeks. The first time the Chargers have done that since LaDainian Tomlinson.
He's got some Jamal. He's got this Jamal Charles career path minus when he's healthy at least.
Right. Statistically, yeah.
6 yards a pop.
Right.
Over his career across 2 different places. Now, just something to keep an eye on with the Chargers, but. They're playing hardball, man. They're playing hardball through 2 weeks. Run. Herbert doesn't do a whole lot. If Herbert was a draft prospect, you would say, I don't know if he can carry the load. I don't know. Herbert doesn't have to do much. He's just along for the ride. Well, that's been the case through 2 weeks against the Raiders and the Panthers.
Yeah, I mean, it's a dream start for Harbaugh. Like, it's not perfect, but it's working, and they're winning. But I think this game in particular was more about, like, Carolina is in a death spiral right now, and something needs to change. Like, At this point, I don't see any good coming from just playing Bryce Young for the rest of the season as things currently stand and hoping it gets better. I think they need to change it, even if it means sitting him down for a few weeks.
Yeah, and like to be clear, it doesn't mean sitting him down for a few weeks will work.
Right.
Like they just it's
In
not
fact,
like
it probably won't.
it's not like they didn't practice the entire month of August.
Right.
They did. But it's try something to just get him on track.
Yeah, I mean, like the point being, from this point, there's almost the chances of anything working are minimal. But I think this is the best course of option, or the best course you can set from this point is bench him for a couple of weeks and hope that does something. And even if it doesn't, it has other benefits in that you actually figure out what the rest of the team looks like.
All right, man, let's go. Seattle Seahawks 23, New England Patriots 20. It was an overtime win for the Seahawks, who moved to 2-0. Patriots fall to 1-1. I mentioned earlier the Patriots have to turn around, come back on Thursday Night Football against the Jets. This is a fun back-and-forth game. Seattle, Geno Smith made a few big plays in this game in overtime. It was Zach Charbonnet, running back for the Seahawks, who was filling in for Ken Walker. Had a big run, had a big catch and run to kind of keep things alive, to give Seattle the opportunity for their game-winning field goal. Breakout game for Jackson Smith-Njigba, who set career highs in everything. 12 catches for 117, career highs in receptions, yards, first downs, targets, did the whole thing. JSN looked pretty good, former first-round pick. So Seattle, 2-0 here with their win in New England.
Yeah, led the team in targets, catches, second in yardage to DK Metcalf because he had the big touchdown on the busted coverage. But yeah, huge game for him. Big game for DK Metcalf as well because of that big play. And then the other one was, we mentioned before when we were talking about Malik Neighbors and the absurd target share. I think Hunter Henry was second on that list. Like, again, with a complete outlier number. He had 10 targets. He had like 6 catches in the first half, like just into the second quarter, I think.
He had 109, yes. He had 109 of the 149 receiving yards for the Patriots. No one else had more than 12. Jalen Polk had 12, including a touchdown.
Right, and we were like just in the second quarter, and he already had 6 catches for 60-something yards. Like, they were loading him up.
Yeah, I mean, New England's passing attack is limited.
Yes.
Coming out of week 1, it was also limited against the Bengals, but they won, right? They won 16-10. So it feels the narrative is like, oh yeah, they're running the ball, they're playing defense. Narrative, I mean, me too, saying this whole thing. They're running the ball, they're playing defense. Old school, type of winning here for New England. The lack of passing attack shows up in a game like this, where you have a busted coverage. You're not playing the same clean defense that they did last week against the Bengals. You have a busted coverage for a touchdown. You're giving up a little bit more through the air, and you have to keep up a little bit more. So Jacoby Brissett finishing 15 of 27 for 149, also got sacked 3 times. They still ran the ball pretty effectively with Ramondre Stevenson, had a big run in there with Antonio Gibson, New England, but the offense certainly lacking some explosiveness through the air.
Yeah, it was. Interesting battle in this game. The Patriots were tracking DK Metcalf with Christian Gonzalez. So you had this fascinating, and it's going to look like, if you looked at DK Metcalf's stat line, you'd be like, wow, Gonzalez got lit up, right? But there was a breakdown in communication, was a coverage bust for that big touchdown.
I think that was on Duggar. I don't know where we put it, but I think that was on Kyle Duggar.
Either way, even if you want to put it on Gonzalez, it's not like, it's not a sort of clean, he got beat on the play type of thing. It's a mental breakdown somewhere in that secondary. And if you just look at the overall kind of coverage numbers for Gonzalez, held up pretty well. Like 8 targets, 5 catches, 31 yards, had a forced incompletion in there as well. That's a pretty solid day for somebody that spent all day tracking DK Metcalf.
I just want to touch on JSN and just the Seattle offense overall. JSN, Jackson Smith-Njigba. I mean, coming out as a first rounder, like, this was not the game, but like, this is the style that they were expecting. They moved him all over the place. He works mostly out of the slot, showed his toughness, did have a drop in there, but caught the ball, showed toughness over the middle, had some yak plays. Just a huge addition. Now, Tyler Lockett had a big overtime catch as well. Week 1, Tyler Lockett was the go-to guy, but I think you're starting to see the versatility. This is why every offseason I'm looking at a team's receiving core and saying, give me 3. I want 3 options. Because in a game like this, where DK is getting tracked, by Christian Gonzalez, and Gonzalez does a pretty good job on him outside of the coverage bust by Duggar. And, Lockett, again, he's getting older. You have the ability to go to Jackson Smith and Jigba now as a third option. Having more options in the passing attack is just massive. And that's what Seattle has. And Geno Smith is playing some good football right now, throwing the ball pretty well. He had a very good game. They had dropped back a ton, made good decisions, got hurt by a bunch of drops. He's got a PFF adjusted completion percentage of 87%. He was on target, accurate throughout this entire game. But it helps having all the extra target, right? The third receiving option is huge for Seattle. And then just wanted to shout out, Charbonnet. I think, I don't think he's as good as Ken Walker. And he didn't have the same type of run blocking that Walker had last week. But Charbonnet with a huge run in overtime to help set up the game-winning field goal. And again, there was a 3rd and 6 catch and run in the flat where he does just enough to get the first down to keep things alive for Seattle. These little plays adding up for the Seahawks, who are 2-0.
The other second straight week for Keon White having a huge game.
Yes.
He was wrecking the interior in particular of that Seattle offensive line. Like, they were lining him up basically as a defensive tackle in pass rushing situations. And that guy has the strength to play inside, but the quickness that makes him just too much to handle for those guards. And he was just destroying guards and centers with these quick pass rushing move. Like, the number of quick wins.
Really good as an interior rusher.
Yeah,
absolutely.
The number of quick wins that he had was remarkable. Like, he was immediately in Geno Smith's face multiple times.
He's playing that Trey Flowers type of role really well for New England. He's been by far their most effective pass rusher through 2 weeks. And then Byron Murphy, the rookie defensive tackle, had a nice game for Seattle. He had 5 unofficial pressures, including a sack in there. But yeah, look, Seattle 2-0. Mm-hmm. We got some bets from our viewers and listeners here that Seattle is going to be the team in the NFC West that they're going to win. Well, they're in first place.
Well, yesterday helped them, right? With the 49ers getting knocked
Niners
off.
lose. Arizona and is 1-1, and the Rams are 0-2.
Yeah, I mean, Arizona took a win off the Rams, but more importantly, San Francisco, the team that's expected to win that division, dropped one.
So yeah, impressive win, and they do it without, I don't talk about running backs a whole lot here, but Ken Walker's been a difference maker, I think, for Seattle. They do it without him. They weren't effective on the ground overall, but again, made just enough plays, both sides of the ball here for Seattle. Mm-hmm. Anything else on this game here, Sam?
Nope.
I'll say this about the Patriots. They're better than I thought they would be.
Yeah.
Through 2 weeks. I had concerns about the new coaching staff. Gerard Mayo, you just didn't have expectations for Gerard Mayo. I didn't know what to expect. It was also the first time the Patriots went outside of the organization to hire anyone, pretty much, in about 20 years. And it was this, we're going to grab Alex Van Pelt from here and Marcus Covington from there. Like, they're pulling people from all these different systems, pulling it together. All the reports out of training camp are bad. And through 2 weeks, they're playing sound fundamental football. They are running the ball pretty effectively, playing pretty good defense overall. They just don't have enough players.
Yeah, I mean, so
on
the big
offense, right? To create big plays.
The big thing is their defense. Like, that was a question heading into the season. I think the assumption was that the defense would still be good, but it was a real question, I think, absent Bill Belichick, what if that defense falls apart as well? I think we expected the offense to struggle, but I think it was a real question, like, what if the defense does as well? Because Belichick, that was the thing that he was doing. The defense looks as good as ever. I mean, Keon White looks fantastic. Christian Gonzalez has had a really good start again, backing up the limited snaps we'd seen from him. The defense looks very good still. So that makes the offense struggling less of a problem than it would be if they had Carolina's defense as well. I think we would look at this team in a very different light. We'd be like, nothing's good for the Patriots. Offense can't work. The defense is getting gashed. They're one of the worst teams in the NFL. But they have a good defense in a year where so far defense seems to be in the ascendancy. And so, yeah, we can live with some – this is – Jacoby Brissett is actually one of those classic game-managing type of quarterbacks, right? Maybe this is the year for having a game-managing quarterback. Defense is in the ascendancy. If you've got a good defense, it's actually a good year to have one of these guys that's limited but maybe isn't a disaster.
Harbaugh would love Jacoby Brissett.
Yes.
He would work well with the Jim Harbaugh. All right, we'll see the Patriots again Thursday night against the Jets. Let's go Packers-Colts here. Packers get their first win of the season, 16-10 over the Colts. Colts fall to 0-2. Packers 1-1 here. Malik Willis gets the win as the starter for the Packers. Finishes 12 of 14 for 122 and a touchdown. But the Packers ran for 261, including 151 from Josh Jacobs. Willis added 41 on the ground. Jaden Reed a little bit, as a receiver with a 22-yarder, 37 yards total. So the Packers, you said, hey, I want to see Matt LaFleur's game plan for Malik Willis.
What a job.
Outstanding. And now look, it's funny how the narrative works, because if they had lost 17-16, we might say, they just didn't have enough offensively.
Yeah, but you would be like...
But they got Malik Willis to manage the game, as one of our viewers said last night on the Instant Reaction. No sacks, no picks, no real negative plays. I got more stats on Willis later, but I thought it was an impressive job by Matt LaFleur and the Packers.
Even if they had lost the game, you would be like, you would be questioning the decision to have Malik Willis as your backup quarterback, not the job that Matt LaFleur had done in the game. You'd be like, what do you expect? He had Malik Willis as a starter, right? The fact that he got this performance and win out of Malik Willis is a staggering coaching job when you consider what Willis's baseline had been previously in the NFL. Some of the numbers were absolutely nuts, and they cooled down a little bit as the game went on, but early, the stats were absolutely absurd. Green Bay had over 100 yards in the first quarter, 161. 6 different ball carriers, right? So they were breaking out every conceivable run that was in the playbook was being run, and the Colts couldn't stop any of it. That was a huge thing. They were just absolutely wrecking them on the ground. Now, the problem that they were experiencing is it wasn't necessarily translating to points. So they were absolutely running riot all over the Colts defense, but they were 10-0 up. And okay, Josh Jacobs then fumbles going in for a touchdown. Zaire Franklin, I think, was the one that forced it out. Like, that's a big save. And that was, remember week 1, there were a couple of those games where it turned on one of those types of plays.
Or it's the year of the fumble on the way into the end zone.
I think it's because we're noticing them more because scoring is down, offensive production is down, so these plays are determining games, right? These are massive swing plays. But anyway, the point being, that felt like another one of those, like, that's Chekhov's fumble, right? That's going to come back later in the game and be the reason the Colts win or the Packers don't win. But Green Bay then had 34 carries in the first half. Like, these are absurd numbers. And yeah, because they didn't actually convert it into the too many points, the Colts were able to come back and had a shot late in the game. But just a remarkable coaching job. I would almost immediately feel like that's one of the most impressive coaching performances I've ever seen. Only at the same time, we've got Kevin O'Connell making magic happen with Sam Darnold at quarterback. And I'm like, okay, there's quite a few good coaching jobs happening right now. But you turn this guy, Malik Willis, who couldn't function in a different offense previously, into somebody who could execute a game plan. His passing map must look ridiculous, but it's all short. It's like extended handoffs. Yeah. They're basically just like, tosses, like long handoff plays, screens. Didn't ask him to do a lot passing, but you wouldn't want them to, and it worked perfectly.
Yeah, there was a 32. The pass was 32. It went for 39, but a jump ball essentially to Romeo Doubs, where Doubs, mosses the corner. That was a big gain. But other than that, what you had mentioned, the short passing game for Malik Willis. I mean, there's something about a coach being able to develop a game plan in a one game, could be a 2 or 3 game setting here for the Packers, to just get by with the backup quarterback. And that's exactly what Matt LaFleur was able to do. Willis's issue in his limited NFL career was getting rid of the ball quickly, taking the sacks, negative plays. When he would throw the ball from a clean pocket, there were some inaccuracy issues, but he would, even when I saw him at camp with the Titans, I was like, the ball comes off his hand well. He's obviously got a good arm, and he was pinpoint on that Dontavian Wicks touchdown, right. a little quick out, put it right on him. Like, he could throw some accurate passes. It was just that consistency, right? You don't want him dropping back 25, 30 times and making good decision after good decision. He'd probably take 4 or 5 sacks in those plays. And then in this game, because his average time to throw, snap to release or snap to the end of a play, was 3.5 seconds coming into the season or coming into this game. through his limited 2 seasons. 3.5. That is a monster number. That is very long. That is holding the ball way too long, right? The longest in the NFL is usually under 3, high 2.8s, 2.9s, maybe 3. 3.5 seconds. LaFleur was able to shave almost a second off of that in this game. So Willis is getting rid of the ball in 2.57 seconds. Boom. Like all that quick passing game. And he only had to drop back a handful of times. He had a few scrambles in there. They built the run game to control the ball. I mean, it was an outstanding job. Like the most impressive 16-point effort you'll see because of the circumstances here.
And we said, heading into this game, he's a one read and run quarterback. And so the first read is everything. And of the 14 attempts, 9 of them were on that first look, that first read. Like LaFleur dialed up, okay, I know what I'm dealing with. Like that's what this was. I understand my quarterback's limitations and what this scheme needs to be for him to have success in this game. So I need to make sure that first read is clean and open and good and dial up what he needs. And it was just a masterful job from LaFleur.
And including there was a third down where the first read wasn't really there and Willis took off and created a big run.
Yeah,
with his legs.
The first read and run thing is not always a bad thing. He's athletic and he's got incredible tools. That's why people liked him as a prospect, generally in that draft, the ones that did. You can make that work. It's just the question is how long can you make it work for?
I got the sense, remember when and I get this from Vrabel's perspective, when Malik Willis was developing and he would miss a read and then run for 25 yards, and Vrabel was mad at him in the preseason, which I get, right? You're trying to develop him. It was almost like LaFleur said, look, if I don't win on this play, me, play caller, if I don't get a guy open on this play, go ahead, take off, use your legs, at least create something on this. And LaFleur won more often than not, right? They created enough open throws in this thing that were there. And when it wasn't there, Willis took off and they made it work.
Yeah, it's a very different approach to coaching him. And in Vrabel's defense, I think their goals are different. So LaFleur.
Yeah, I'm not trashing Vrabel for this. Vrabel's correct in
but
thinking
people
process-oriented about Willis.
People will use this as a reflection on what Vrabel did with Malik Willis, which I don't think is quite fair. LaFleur is essentially operating on a game-to-game basis with this guy and has no massive interest. I mean, obviously it's good for him if Malik Willis turns into a very good backup. But ultimately, LaFleur has just shown in this game that he doesn't actually need him to get any better long-term. He's no interest in him being a starter. He already has one of those. LaFleur's interest in Malik Willis is this game. Can I get him to operate an offense and for it to work against an NFL defense and for us to get a win if I don't have my starting quarterback? The answer to that has just been proven to be yes. Vrabel was trying to turn this guy into a long-term successful NFL quarterback, so he needed to change the way he played. One read and run doesn't work long-term in the NFL. So I need you to play within the structure more. I need you to be more of a conventional quarterback. I need you to go through progressions and work from within the pocket. One read and run does me no good because you're not learning from that. So Vrabel was trying to hammer this misshapen peg into a round hole, and it wasn't working. LaFleur is I understand what my quarterback is. I don't need him to change. I'm just going to lean into what he does well and minimize the other stuff. So they're working from very different aims when they were trying to deal with the same guy.
On the other side, not a great game from Anthony Richardson and the Colts. They got the running game going. Jonathan Taylor broke free for a few big runs. And if you had told me, Taylor averaged under 4 yards per carry in week 1, and I thought the Colts offense, right, they were explosive because of what Richardson did and the big-time throws that he made. Jonathan Taylor had 12 carries for 103. He broke free on a couple big ones. Richardson had a couple runs in there, including one really late to just kind of set up a Hail Mary attempt. But Richardson was very inconsistent in the pass game again. And it wasn't just the inaccuracy, misreading it too. So he finishes with 3 picks. One came on the Hail Mary, but first interception, just an overthrow over the middle of the field. I thought the second one was more egregious. The timing in the passing game was just off this entire game, I thought, for Richardson and the Colts. And then when Richardson did make a good play, you had a drop in there from A.D. Mitchell. You have Alec Pierce slipping on what should have been a 27-yarder to get them deep into the red zone. Everything was off for the Colts. But Richardson's really had 2 interceptions. Overthrow over the middle of the field into double coverage, and just an egregious misread for me on a seam route. Just throws it right to Eric Wilson, the linebacker. Had a check down available. We had talked a lot about Richardson. These are just blips in reading the field, putting the ball in harm's way. Like the inaccuracy, I think we kind of expect, but he generally reads it out pretty well. I thought everything was off for this Colts passing game today.
A.D. Mitchell should be on track for like a historic rookie season, and yet the combination between Richardson and Mitchell has just been off so far through 2 weeks. There
was a nice 30-yard double move in there. That was
Richardson's
best throw.
The nice play in there. He had a nice throw to him that Mitchell then dropped, and he also missed him a couple of times in this game. Like his misses to Mitchell over 2 weeks have accounted for the better part of like 150 or 200 yards. Like the production that's been left on the table by that combination has been massive through the first 2 weeks.
Yeah, and so I know, I think the Packers deserve a little bit of credit defensively, but I thought, again, they kind of got gashed in the run game. I don't think they fit the run very well. Quay Walker out of position again for the second straight week. I thought again, if you told me that the Colts offensive line would, create running room against the Packers, that's what I expected. Maybe they didn't run the ball enough and they put too much on Anthony Richardson after they were down 10-0 early in this game. But I thought it was a weird game because I thought if Richardson doesn't make some of those mistakes, the Colts put up a lot more points. But those mistakes came back to bite, and he wasn't able to offset them with, a 65-yard, 70-yard throw like he did in week one. So the inaccuracy, misreading it for Richardson, I thought came back to bite in this one.
Do you want to pull up our Matt LaFleur soundbite? I don't think it goes anywhere, but it's kind of funny.
Oh, yeah. Forgot to throw to that.
Yeah.
It's just funny. Let's go.
Right.
I asked Malik why he didn't throw the ball on that third down, and he told me that Josh threw up on the ball. I was like, that's the first time I've ever heard that. Matter of fact, the official came over to me, Sean came over to me and said, we saw your center thrown up on the ball. Do you want us to take him out next time? I said, absolutely. Please do that because, you're talking about a critical situation, and it's third down, and I've never had a throw with vomit on a football. So I don't know. I don't think Malik probably didn't appreciate that.
You ever seen that?
No. No. At Hog NFL had the initial tweet from this with that answer and also the video of him literally like just before the snap. I've seen that before where offensive linemen like in their stance or whatever just projectile vomit and carry on like nothing happened. Well, Myers did that on the football and then snapped it to Malik Willis, who then ran instead of throwing it on third down. I'm not quite sure I follow that logic. I think, want to get rid of the ball more if it was covered in vomit.
He doesn't want to throw a pick. You don't want the ball slipping.
I'm just getting rid of that thing if it's
This is
covered
the
in
future
vomit.
of pro days. This is the future.
Yeah, vomit on the football?
Yeah.
How do you handle it?
A good coach will puke on the ball and say, all right, throw it the puke ball.
Okay.
Throw it with the puke ball. All right, I got no more use for this game. Packers 16, Colts 10, Colts 0-2. Got to think about some things over there. What did I say next? Cleveland Browns. They get their first win. Browns 18, Jags 13. Browns move to 1-1. Jags fall to 0-2. Deshaun Watson looked better in this game. Like the passing line isn't great, but it was probably his cleanest game in a while, believe it or not, despite finishing 22 of 34 for 186.
Yeah.
And from a Jacksonville perspective, outside of their passing attack was very disjointed. Trevor Lawrence finishes 14 of 30 for 220, sacked 4 times, including one for a safety in the comeback attempt. A couple big plays in there, 66-yarder to Brian Thomas, which was beautiful. They had some downfield passes. Brenton Strange had 3 catches for 65, but just a disjointed attack from Jacksonville. Weird game here, Browns and Jags.
Yeah, it was. You're right. That was Deshaun Watson's best game, maybe as a Brown. Like, the stats weren't great. He did get let down by his receivers a few times. Like, he had his adjusted completion rate is good because his receivers dropped a few passes.
4 or 5 drops in there.
Yeah. If they get that level of play, as evidenced by this game, if they get that level of play out of Deshaun Watson every game this season, they're going to win quite a lot of games because that's good enough.
Yep.
And honestly, that's what they're targeting at this point from Watson, is just be good enough for this thing to work.
He had some of the sack avoidance magic plays that he'd had in the past as well.
Yeah, like it was, again, I don't think that the player he was in Houston is ever coming back, but this is the guy they're looking for, right? If this is what they get going forward, that's good enough, and that's what they're shooting for. So yeah, that was an encouraging thing from Cleveland's point of view. The defense was a lot better. It didn't get gashed nearly as much. There was that really nice play to Brian Thomas Jr., who had an up and down game. Like, that play was amazing. It was actually really, really nice. Single coverage, yeah, again, falls into the bucket of things he's supposed to be good at. But when you watch the play, you understand how he's so good at those. Like, he obviously the speed plays, but he kind of leant on, was it Greg Newsome, the corner? Kind of leant on him a bit and then backed, like leaned off at the last moment to gain that separation. Like, they're not, every receiver that's good at running fast in a straight line is not good at that, which is how you get like 1.5 yards open at the catch point, as opposed to just you've been able to run step for step with the corner and it's still contested. Like that, being able to manufacture that last second space is really good. But he also dropped a slant in there, and it's like, okay, those happen. Malik Neighbors dropped an important pass as well, but those are the plays that he needs to be good at as well.
Yeah, I mean, overall pretty impressive, but it was like that. I was looking at it. The Jags' EPA per play ended up fine, but the success rate was low in this game. So the EPA per play comes in those chunk plays are going to skew it, but it was just this rhythm thing. Like, the thing I was criticizing the Browns for was what the Jags felt like in this game. Just no rhythm, just no consistency from an offensive perspective. But they had big plays. They had some big runs. They had some chunk plays in the pass game. The Jags just don't feel like they're playing winning football right now. Red zone, short yardage. It's just not taking the safety. Like, it's just not winning football for the Jags right now. And maybe it would feel different if they didn't blow the lead against the Dolphins last week.
Right.
But they're 1-7 in their last 8 games. And they have been very streaky under Doug Peterson now at this point. Remember, Peterson did this amazing job of resetting the culture for from Urban Meyer, getting Trevor Lawrence back on track, but they started slow, right? They started slow in 2022. Of course they did, because they're coming off the Urban Meyer year, and now, was it 22? We in the right year? But then they finished strong, and then last year they started strong, and they finished horribly. They've been horribly streaky, and I just don't feel like the Jags are just playing winning football right now when they need to.
Yeah, I mean, they're not. They haven't been playing particularly well at all. Like, again, it's individuals play well. Like, Josh Hines-Allen had a great game. Now, look who he was going up against. It's the backup offensive tackle. And I'm using singular there. They have one backup offensive tackle, the Browns, that is problematic, right? James Hudson at left tackle. That's not good. That's a problem. That's exploitable by players like Josh Hines-Allen. The other backup offensive tackle is DeJuan Jones at right tackle, who honestly is probably their starter from this point going forward, right? Jack Conklin is reaching the end of his career, or at least the end of his career in Cleveland, given his contract. DeJuan Jones is going to be starting there sooner rather than later anyway, and he's good.
So they were moving Conklin to left tackle at practice.
Yeah. Either way, just stop. They don't have a pair of backup offensive tackles playing. They have one. They have one problematic backup that's out there. DeJuan Jones is effectively a starter, and he isn't bad, so it's not a problem. It's not a reason that anything is struggling. Anyway, the point is the Jags have had, like, individuals are playing well. The team is not playing well.
Yeah, this is one of those games where I don't want to, like, overrate the narrative here. I thought it was a pretty even game from both teams. The Jags were 1 for 3 in goal-to-go possessions. Like, this is one of those games where it's like the play for play was similar. The Browns, they brought in Jameis Winston a bunch on 4th and shorts. They've got my favorite, the 4th down package, right? Where you bring in, you have got the QB sneak package. Jameis running QB sneaks. They also ran one wide, from that split back. When you're crowd in the middle, I liked what the Browns did in those situations there. I mean, it just came down to a whole bunch of little plays, and the Jags not being able to make key plays in crunch time or in the tight red zone. Tight red zone stuff has been awful for the Jags, at least in this game, at times last week with the Dolphins as well.
Yep. No, they did not have – they were not efficient in those situations. A few other players that I want to individually shout out. We've now had 2 straight games of Devin Lloyd, I think, being a real impact player for the Jags. Same thing for Cleveland, 2 straight games of Denzel Ward looking like one of the best corners in the NFL again. Like he'd sort of gone off the boil and been injured a bit. So those 2 guys, I think, have had really strong starts to the season.
Yeah, I just want to like back up my point statistically. I agree on the players you mentioned there. This game was very even. Similar number of first downs, similar number of total yards. Jags were at 323. The Browns were at 297. Jags averaged more yards per play, skewed maybe a little bit by some of the late game stuff, but rushing yards were almost identical, 127 to 125 for the Jags. Like a lot of similarities. It really comes down. The Browns were 3 for 3 on 4th down. As I mentioned, they had a good 4th down package to keep drives alive. They scored in their only red zone attempt. Jags were 1 for 4 in the red zone, 1 for 3 in those goal to go situations. So like when we're trying to diagnose this thing, it's like get open in the red zone, call better plays in the tight red zone, which is always a fickle thing, right? The teams that are great in the red zone one year tend to revert back. You know, it's tough to just be good, but they got to find a way to put the ball into the end zone and be more consistent. And the same thing last week with the Jags. They've got this lead. They've got multiple opportunities in the 4th quarter to make a comeback, and that's when Trevor Lawrence gets sacked. That's when the offensive line pass protection breakdowns happen. That's when the bad plays happen in the biggest moments. Jags have been poor in that sense the last couple weeks. The Browns in this game were very good, right? The rhythm of the offense. I kept saying rhythm last week for the Browns. They scored 16 points offensively, but it was still the best rhythm offense I think that the Browns have had with Deshaun Watson. So that's something to at least build upon in Cleveland.
And Lawrence needs to play better. I mean, it's sort of an unfair way of doing it, but he now got the contract that means you take on more responsibility. You know, you've got the $55 million a year deal. You now need to play at a level where you are unquestionably not an issue. And he wasn't at that level in this game. I mean, there were some plays where he missed. There was a play, I think it was a 3rd down play where they were sort of backed up. Cam Robinson got beaten and just straight tackled Myles Garrett. Like literally just, I'm lost here. Rugby tackled him to the ground. No flag. Officials completely ignored it. It was an incomplete pass anyway. So okay, no harm, no foul. But it was theoretically, that was a play that the officials manufactured for Trevor Lawrence to get away with it and to actually escape. And he couldn't take advantage of it. Like you got to make the plays that are there to be made, and he isn't at the moment.
Myles Garrett, another good game. He did have a strip sack in there, a couple Das Wunderkind, Alex Wright, big sack in there as well. He had a couple nice rushes. Browns pass rush remains very good. I mean, again, it's not like the Jags had a pretty good pass rush too. Josh Hines-Allen had a big game off the edge. 8 unofficial pressures and a couple other wins in there. There's not a lot of like player for player specific criticism for the Jags other than like do it at the right times, I would say. And the Browns did it in the right times in this game. Anything else?
No, we got other games to get to.
We do. We're going slow again.
Very slow, yeah.
No, it's about the same pace as last week.
Yeah, but the problem is all the good games are still to go.
Minnesota Vikings 23, 49ers 17. The Vikings move to 2-0. Niners fall to 1-1. Sam Darnold doing it again here for the Vikings. And he finishes 17 of 26 for 268, 2 touchdowns and a pick. Justin Jefferson with the highlight reel 97-yard touchdown out of his 133. He had a quad contusion. Should be okay coming out of that.
Per Justin Jefferson, yeah.
Per Justin Jefferson. He should be okay. But he was gone from the game for a little bit, and the Vikings held on. Also one of those games that the one score maybe doesn't do it justice. We're 2 plays away from this basically being a 2-score game. Fred Warner did all he could to keep the Niners in this, intercepting Sam Darnold in the red zone and forcing a fumble on Aaron Jones. Was it Aaron Jones, right?
Yeah.
On the way in. Year of the fumbles at the goal line. Fred Warner saving a touchdown. And Vikings kind of dominated this game, though.
They really did. I think Fred Warner was individually responsible for like 14 points in San Francisco's direction, right? Like the interception, I honestly think he might be the only linebacker in the NFL that makes that play. that specific interception. That was one of those examples where elite coverage linebackers tighten windows, squeeze throwing lanes, and just make it more difficult to complete passes. That was one where I think basically every other coverage linebacker in the NFL, that's a window where the ball gets through. And Fred Warner is good enough that he not only closed the window, but actually picked the pass off as well. And as you said, the fumble on Aaron Jones, the Vikings are 20-7 up at that point, going in for another touchdown.
Right.
And Fred Warner says, nope, not today, knocks the ball out. Again, the NFL defenders are so good now at punching directly on the football. That peanut punch play that only, like, it's named the peanut punch because Charles Tillman was the guy that used to do it so often. All of them are doing it now.
I would bring Mike Tyson to training camp and say, peanut punch the ball.
Mike Tyson.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Mike Tyson.
Yeah.
Former boxer.
He was yucking it up with Jerry Jones and Tom Brady before the game.
Oh, yeah. I saw you ask what could that conversation
I'd love
have been.
to hear audio of that.
Mint juleps discussed, absolutely. But I would bring Tyson in to practice against the peanut punch.
Okay.
Just saying.
Anyway, yeah. So 2 points. Fred Warner, phenomenal. And yes, the Vikings, this being as close a game as it was score-wise, I think absolutely flattered San Francisco because absent Fred Warner, I think the Vikings are winning this by a couple of scores and probably going away. In a few things. Christian McCaffrey onto IR since like the last time we talked. He went from, oh, by the way, he's surprisingly missing week 1 to actually we're shutting him down and putting him on IR for a while. So he's gone for at least a month. And then this battle of Shanahan versus Brian Flores, second year in a row, you got to say Flores is winning.
Yeah, let me pull out. I may have had the wrong blitz numbers here. So Brock Purdy's going to finish with 3 turnover-worthy plays, sacked 6 times in this game. And we don't have the sound bite because it wasn't all that clear, but Brock Purdy on the way out during the handshakes after the game goes up to Brian Flores and says, crazy scheme.
Yeah.
Crazy scheme. Now, listen, we've been on this show before where I have used the phrase crazy scheme to describe defensive coordinators, and you criticize me for saying, oh, yeah, that's too much. You can't call people crazy.
Yeah.
Brock Purdy went right to Brian Flores' face and called him crazy.
Yeah.
But it was compliment, the crazy scheme.
Yeah, and so what was amazing about the last game is when you watched Brock Purdy's turnover-worthy plays from a year ago, they were plays where he was confident and decisive and just wrong, right? It was like he thought he knew where he was going with the ball, only he didn't understand the rules of the defense, and there was a guy waiting for it when the ball arrived. This time, I think when you watched his plays, he was a lot less decisive. Like, I think the impact of a year ago, or even what he was seeing in this game, was actually causing him to hesitate, and we weren't seeing these decisive, quick, in-rhythm plays where he's just putting the ball in the air, regardless of whether it's a right or a wrong decision. It was like he was second-guessing everything he was seeing. Like, the defense was causing him to hold the ball a beat and not quite understand, like, is this guy open? Is there a linebacker there? Uh-oh. And slow everything down, and that allowed the defense to get to him, and that's where a lot of the sacks came from.
There's some wild numbers in that, right? So against the blitz, and again, it's usually 5 or more rushers, which the Vikings did a bunch, 23 dropbacks. Purdy finishes 12 of 17 for 114. Nothing crazy there. But he had 1 of his interceptions, 2 turnover-worthy plays, and 4 sacks on 23 dropbacks against the blitz. What you had mentioned, though, the average time to throw on those plays was over 3 seconds.
Yeah.
So on the blitz, right, remember last year when Jared Goff and the Lions kept tearing up the Vikings blitz, it was just get rid of the ball. They always had answers.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. Every time the Niners generally have answers, the Vikings were taking them away. I mean, Blake Cashman was flying around the field making plays, got his hands on 3 passes. 3 passes, I believe it was. One of them got tipped up for a pick, also had a sack. Against the blitz, night and day for Purdy. Now, against no blitz, these numbers get a little skewed by the fourth quarter. If I could just sort out, I'll take that out in a second. He was like 16 for 19 for 205, 10 yards per attempt. A completely different game, sacked only twice. Let me get that before the fourth quarter because it was skewed a little bit in garbage time. But that was the story of the game, was the Vikings heating him up, but not speeding him up necessarily,
right.
Heating him up, confusing him, and getting home because the combination of the rush and the coverage just had the Niners just in shambles offensively.
They really did. I mean, you've got to give credit to Brian Flores. This defensive scheme, it's unique. Nobody else is running anything like this in the NFL, and it is singularly qualified to destroy what is the best offensive scheme in the NFL right now. For 2 straight years now, he has shown that regardless of personnel, this scheme is an antidote to the Kyle Shanahan offense. Now, maybe that doesn't work for 17 games in a year, and that's what he's battling against relative to a year ago. But he's shown that on a 1-game sample size, this defense can stop that offense like nothing else.
Against no blitz, Purdy 9 of 12 for 127, touchdown, passer rating of 136. Grade wasn't necessarily great, but again, results-wise, a lot more effective against traditional 3- and 4-man rush. It's also one of those things where the rest of the league, I don't know that they could just be like, let's do what Brian Flores does, because he has been in his own quadrant of unique when it comes to how they operate, how they send extra rushers, what they're doing from a coverage shell standpoint behind it, but just really impressive there. And then Darnold, right? He's got the bad interception in there, a couple that he would want back, but overall, playing well again, playing winning football here. And they had a big boy drive at the end. Again, this was closer than it should have been.
Yeah.
Because of Darnold's own faults too, but 2 turnovers for the Vikings. And they had a big boy drive to go up 2 scores late in the game. And they did it without Justin Jefferson. And that's huge for the Vikings. Impressive start. You asked the question in the instant reaction, though. How many games before you believe in Sam Darnold? Mm-hmm. And I said 4.
Yeah.
Because we've seen 3 before.
Agreed.
So we have to
that's
get
the
to
thing,
4.
right? You look at this and you're like, oh, Sam Darnold's different. Like Kevin O'Connell has unlocked him. Darnold was unfairly maligned in previous years. He's never had this kind of support system before. And you can argue, though, that's perfectly valid. It is also perfectly valid to say we have seen a 2-game sample size of Sam Darnold looking this good in the past. And that'll be true next week as well if he does it. If it's 3 straight weeks, that will remain true. We have seen a 3-game stretch where Sam Darnold has looked good in the past. After that, it starts to get into uncharted territory, right? From that point on, we will not have seen this before. And the question will then become, how many more games do we need to see before we come to the conclusion that Kevin O'Connell has turned Sam Darnold into the next Geno Smith or whatever, and actually he is a guy that can be a high-level starter going forward? That is the fascinating unknown question right now regarding Darnold and the Vikings offense. We've seen this before so far, but we're 1 week away, or 2 weeks away, I guess, from that no longer being the case, and that's when it gets really interesting.
I just want to shout out Ty Chandler, too. Ran the ball extremely well. 5 first downs for Minnesota in this game. Finished with 82 yards on 10 carries. To compliment Aaron Jones, Jones had the fumble, but kind of having a much better run game so far this year in Minnesota than they did last year, in addition to what they're doing defensively.
And just quickly on the way out, shout out Jordan Mason as well. Like that relief,
yeah, Mason was good again.
That relief job for Christian McCaffrey, that's back-to-back 100-yard games for him, even though this one obviously didn't end up in a win. Like he backed up his Week 1 debut.
You're still in this weird world for the Niners when you remove one of their stars. It worked great on Monday Night Football against the Jets. But last year, when you removed a Debo, you removed Trent Williams. Sometimes it was both together. Now you remove a McCaffrey for whatever reason. All the on-off, the wit-without splits work pretty poorly. Like they make the Niners look worse anytime they're missing one person in their star-studded cast.
It's also, I guess,
are they really that fragile when they miss one of their stars? 6 days ago, they looked great against the Jets.
I mean, there's always confounding factors.
Or is it just they ran into Flores? If Flores keeps running into them without one of their stars,
that's what I was going to say, right? Like in all this, Flores' scheme beats Shanahan's scheme. It is worth pointing out that this is the second game that they faced each other where the 49ers have been without one of their big star players. I think they were missing both Trent Williams and Debo last year, certainly one of them. And this year they're without Christian McCaffrey. Now, I don't know that it would have made the difference, but it's at least annoyingly confounding because you can't be sure that it wouldn't make a difference.
All right, man, let's go Saints-Cowboys. This was my biggest surprise of the weekend.
Yeah.
Saints are legit. Saints 44, Cowboys 19. Saints move to 2-0 in dominant fashion in Dallas. Cowboys fall to 1-1. Saints offense looks unstoppable right
I mean, from a objective standpoint, this was the biggest surprise of the week. Like Vegas, remember, after week one, it's like how much of what we saw was real, how much of it was the opponent. Vegas had this line. Dallas were 6.5-point favorites when we picked the games, right? So the Vegas was like, that was all Carolina week one. The Saints aren't actually that good. Carolina's just that bad. Dallas was really good. They rolled, and the Saints murdered them. Like, they destroyed Dallas. The Saints offense looked amazing. Again, the offensive line week one, they were our shout out, right? New Orleans Saints offensive line did great. However, it's worth pointing out the Carolina Panthers have no defensive line. Oh, well, don't worry. They'll get tested next week. You're going up against Micah Parsons and DeMarcus Lawrence and all the players that Dallas can deploy. The Saints' offensive line was phenomenal again against a way better opponent. So, yeah, you can't do anything other than conclude that actually the Saints are one of the best teams in the NFL right now.
I can't believe how good the Saints' offensive line has been. I think they're, as a position unit, the biggest surprise in the NFL through 2 weeks. And I mean, everything the Saints are doing is great. I mean, again, Alvin Kamara looks like throwback Kamara the way he's running the ball. Derek Carr's playing the best little stretch of football maybe in his entire career. Has he played stretches of good football before? Yes, but again, confidence, downfield accuracy. He didn't even have to do a whole lot in this game because he did it early. That beautiful big-time throw to Rashid Shaheed for 70 yards, awesome.
Again. Rashid Shaheed, Carr, like that combination is cooking the NFL right now.
Yeah, I mean, look, the analyst in me is like, he's pinpoint on these posts.
Yeah,
like one of these weeks he's just gonna miss it, But it doesn't like they're putting up 40 points a game, so it's okay if he misses one or two. But look, that they deserve credit for that. Lucas Patrick at left guard was outstanding. Cesar Ruiz has been really good. He has not been great from a production standpoint over the last couple of years. He's playing well. Eric McCoy playing as well as any center in the league. And the tackles are holding up and playing well. Talise Fuanga and Trevor Penning. So this offensive line is one of the biggest stories. And again, week one, you're thinking, is it just because the Panthers have no pass rushers?
Right.
And they're horrendous? No, we're doing it against the Cowboys. Now, the Cowboys, on the other hand, their defensive tackles were horrendous. Right, so this cuts both ways. Was this Jordan Phillips and Mozzie Smith? Like, is this them too? But the Saints deserve all the credit in the world for doing this. But this was like a playoff game for Dallas with how much they were manhandled here.
Yeah, and they were also like, this was as quiet as Micah Parsons has been kept maybe ever. Like, that alone is an achievement for
this game.
Yeah,
yeah,
for the New Orleans offensive line. Like, Joe Alt is getting all the credit, and rightly so, for his start, but Fuanga has been pretty spectacular. Again, the caveat being, yeah, Carolina, they probably stink, but Dallas doesn't. Like, this was a really impressive performance from the Saints, start to finish. They got the big play. They picked off Dak Prescott. Like, they got out to a hot start. They got a good lead. It's like, yeah, Dallas will come back at some point. And then they got an interception off Dak Prescott before halftime. His wide receiver stumbled. It was one of those ones that wasn't really on him. Olave had then a big catch just before halftime, got down to the 1 yard line. They punched it in, and now it's like, all right, that's game. It's now a paddling, right? We've ascended to the point the Dallas isn't coming back. The Saints are running away with this. This is a fairly conclusive ass whooping, and we're only at halftime. And they never got back into it.
Yeah, very impressive by the Saints up front. Was this another example? So Clint Kubiak took over as offensive coordinator.
Yeah.
And is this another example of the Shanahan-Kubiak derivatives?
Yep.
Just changing the NFL, changing the game. By the way, we mentioned this last week. I'm like a year late on my Saints takes, right? Because they would flash this ability last year. They would flash the big play ability. Then Carr was horrible in the red zone. And week to week, they were very inconsistent. Now, all of a sudden, they're unbelievable in the red zone. They score every opportunity, moving people at the point of attack. Carr's playing great football, and the explosive playmakers are making explosive plays. Like, everything that I thought that they should have been last year, and they've been through 2 weeks. And does Clint Kubiak deserve all the credit for making that happen?
Certainly a lot of it. The late Ian Hartitz, where's he at now? Late of PFF, now at My Fantasy Life, Matthew Berry's Fantasy Life. tweeted a stat that through 2 weeks, or no, last year, the Saints ranked dead last in the NFL in play action rate, right? 14.4% play action last season. This year, through 2 games, they have used play action 52.3% of the time.
52%.
Which is the most in the NFL.
Anything over 40 is pretty aggressive.
Yeah. You remember, like, previously, once the sort of the statistics, the nerds had proven that actually play action just works all the time, you should probably use it more. The question was always, well, okay, how far can you take that, right? How high a number can you use play action on, and it still makes sense? Well, Kubiak appears to be on a one-man mission to find out what that number is.
I mean, part of it's the game flow's been in their favor the entire time. They haven't had to, make comebacks and have, But it's good. I mean,
so somebody else was kind of tweeting, do you need a Shanahan like disciple now as your offensive play caller, your offense? And I don't think you necessarily need one, but if you don't have one, you better have something else that's working. Like they were like, you need top tier coaching. I don't know that that's necessarily true, but you definitely can't be behind the curve, which I think is what we're discovering in a few places. Like, as long as you're on or ahead of the curve, you're fine. You just can't be lagging behind it. And the Saints have gone from probably being behind it to now being minimum on the curve somewhere, whether or not Clint Kubiak is actually, at the Shanahan level forefront or not. He's definitely put them back on that curve. And our guy, Josh Dubow from the AP, had this tweet. He had it at 14. I think they got it to 15 before it stopped. The Saints had 15 straight drives where they scored to start the season. 15 straight.
It's crazy. It is nuts. I mean, it's, again, the analyst in me is like, well, they can't keep this up. Like, you give them credit for what they're doing, and that's like, well, they got to regress at some point. But even if they regress,
they've got a lot of room.
If they do half of that, it's still unbelievable. So, I think if you were drawing up, how do you maximize Derek Carr? It is definitely heavy play action, down the field, lean into those playmakers. I'm most impressed by the fact that they've got the offensive line absolutely cooking up front. From a pass protection standpoint, from a run game perspective, Kamara looking sharp as a runner. Lots of like in New Orleans. And then the defense has been good too.
Yeah.
The defense you're right, but that Dak interception, I didn't have the volume on a ton with on this one with Tom Brady, but like when I listened, it sounded like he was at least bringing some more insight to the table in this game. You hate every announcer, so
I have no issue with Tom Brady one way or the other.
He took some criticism after week 1.
He did.
As an announcer.
He
wasn't bringing much to the table. In this one, he was at least describing the action, and I think he was right on point. Look, Dak's receiver falls down, and it's not on him. But other passes, he's, firing him into coverage, and, the Saints making life difficult on opposing QBs.
I was listening to a podcast after last week that was talking about Brady's debut as an announcer, and they were reading quotes from some Guardian breakdown over his debut, which was one of the harshest things I've ever heard based off the comments that were coming out of this. They were like criticizing everything from his debut, including his nasally tone. Like they were ripping how he just sounds talking.
His voice.
He just sounds like a generic American. Come on, this is harsh. Like if you put into Chat GPT or whatever and just asked it to dial up an American voice, it would spit out Tom Brady. You can't rip on his nasally tone as part of the reason he's not a good announcer.
That's what you get when you get a massive contract with zero experience, sight unseen.
And to be fair, that's maybe problematic, but he's fine. Anyway, 2 things that I wanted to hit before we get out of this game. Jalen Tolbert, I thought, had at least a couple of impressive plays. He had a really nice snag for a catch. Maybe his most impressive play, though, Brian Brzee forced a fumble on Dak Prescott down the red zone. Tolbert was in the end zone when this happened and sprinted his way out to recover the ball at the 20-yard line. So that's a pretty impressive hustle play for a team that's getting wrecked, and a wide receiver like trying to force his way higher up on the depth chart makes a couple of big plays. And then the second thing is there's some kind of hex that Alvin Kamara has over Mike Zimmer defenses. Remember, he had 6 touchdowns against Zimmer for the Vikings, so he had 4 in this game.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's the last time Mike Zimmer's defense faced him, but if it is, that's 10 touchdowns in 2 games.
There was a lot of stuff we missed matchup-wise coming into this thing. We just missed Kamara versus Zimmer.
Yeah.
We missed like the Clemson QB battle of Deshaun Watson and Trevor Lawrence, Caleb Williams and C.J. Stroud and all of that number 1, number 2 pick stuff from a couple years ago. Storyline. We missed the storyline stuff.
Missed the storylines.
Yeah, Kamara against Zimmer. I didn't put 2 and 2 together.
Didn't put it together
on that. From a Cowboys perspective, man, just everything bad up front. Because as good as the Saints' offensive line was, that's how bad the Cowboys' defensive line was and linebackers. And like week 3 last year, they had that dud where they lost to the Cardinals, right, as like 14-point favorites.
Right.
They bounced back from that. Mike McCarthy's teams have bounced back from that. So now you have the Cowboys who just, remember they didn't play any close games last
Yeah,
year?
I don't think it's terminal for them.
Yeah.
It's just,
Remember
bad
they
game.
either got blown out or blew teams out last year?
Yeah.
Do they continue this trend and they're just going to bounce right back and blow out? Do they have the Ravens next week? Or am I making that up? Anyway,
They do.
so see if they come back.
At
They've
home.
bounced back from it before. But this is if this happened in the Dome with the Saints, I'd say okay. But this in Dallas, very impressive by the Saints here. Very impressive. Mm-hmm. I got no more use for this game.
Don.
Tampa Bay Bucks, Detroit Lions. Bucks moved to 2-0 with a 20-16 win over the Lions. Huge win for the Bucks. Another one of those games. It's tough to like decipher the why. There was a lot of. This was a close game as far as the flow of the game. It came down to a few of those game-changing plays. Bucks fumbled a bunch of times, kept recovering them.
Yeah.
But Baker Mayfield scramble game winner. He was the leading rusher for the Bucks with 34 yards, including the touchdown. They just found a way to win despite a lot of the injuries on both sides of the ball.
So this was a weird game where like every play seemed to be a massive high leverage play in some way, shape, or form, right? Like everything. I have so many notes on this game because every play felt like a game-defining play that was going to swing it in one direction.
Heavy note.
And there's like 12 of them, right? And they evened themselves out in a weird way. Like there was a crazy harsh defensive pass interference early in the game on Terry and Arnold. That was one. I was like, oh, that's a big swing. Brian Branch has a pass breakup that saves a touchdown. Like Aiden Hutchinson with 1 million sacks against backup offensive linemen. Dropped interception by Jordan Whitehead. There's just so many of these huge plays in this game, but somehow they seem to balance out and end up with the game still being on a knife edge. And it came down really to 2 things. Tampa Bay's defense really tightened up right at the end when it needed to, right? Baker Mayfield put them in positions to win. They needed the defense to hold a couple of times, and it did. And then Baker Mayfield. And this game means, based off the contract that we verbally committed to before the game, I am back on the Baker Mayfield bandwagon. I have to be. He showed up big. He made a couple of huge plays. His scrambles were fantastic. The moxie, he did it. Baker Mayfield showed up well in a huge game, and it was, I think, more impressive than actually it even the difficulty of the assignment was huge going in. It was even more impressive given how badly Aiden Hutchinson was whooping his right tackle, and yet Baker still made the plays.
So it's contextual back on the bandwagon here, despite having 3 turnover-worthy plays, 2 fumbles in which the Bucks jumped back on.
Whatever.
And big interception before coming out of the 2-minute warning in the first half.
Yeah, but then the moxie.
The moxie.
The moxie.
Yeah. So even on
The
his
scramble.
even on
Did
not
you
a great
see-
day,
Did you see what he did to
it was
Malcolm
back-to-back
Rodriguez?
scrambles.
Yeah.
It was back-to-back plays.
But the
where you-
first one, did you see what he did to Malcolm Rodriguez?
I did. Yeah.
Whoop! Just put him in a blender.
Yeah. It's like Brady Urlacher type of stuff.
Right.
It is. It is Brady
And then the next
Urlacher.
play, QB draw in the red zone. I'm going to put this one in as well.
No, it was an impressive finish. It was just an ugly quarterback game. And Jared Goff throwing picks again. He's got 4 picks, right, through 2 weeks. 4 turnover-worthy plays at least. I know that. Goff last year, remember he played such clean football, and then he hit this 2 or 3 game
4
bad
games.
stretch.
You had
4-game stretch.
It was 3 games in 4 weeks
Yeah.
in the middle of the season.
Yeah. Well, he's starting with that
Yeah.
stretch right now. So Goff has to come out of it because, once again, like the Lions ran the ball pretty well. You got Jahmyr Gibbs, ran over Greg Gaines, who's over 300 pounds. I mean, they moved the ball and kept turning it over. And then the Bucks, again, they deserve a ton of credit with their young defensive players stepping up. Zion McCollum had a huge game at corner, looked great.
I only just put this together, but Baker Mayfield and Dan Campbell are like coach and quarterback versions of each other. Can you imagine them as a combination. If we could swap the quarterbacks and it was Baker Mayfield being coached by Dan Campbell, that would be like the most moxie that's ever been assembled in humanity.
A lot of moxie.
I somehow need to make that happen now. Dan Campbell, they went for it fourth and what? From their own 10-yard line with a fake punt and complete the pass to Sione Vaki, which, by the way, is quite a clever way of using him, right? A guy that's safety, running back, this sort of hybrid player where he's the target on the fake punt. That makes a lot of sense. But to go for it from your own 10-yard line with that play, Dan probably the only coach in the NFL that does that.
Yeah. He's an it. What he went for? What was the other fourth down that he went for? I had a lot of notes in this game too.
Right.
I don't know, man. He went for it. 4th and 2 in their own territory, and they got it.
Yeah.
Deep in their own territory. I mean, just at times when other teams aren't doing it. But the Lions started 0 for 3 in the red zone. They're just not. Why didn't this work? Well, those plays. You have Baker scrambling for back-to-back runs, one in the end zone for a touchdown, and the Lions can't score in the red zone. So credit the Bucs for making those stops. I mentioned Zion McCollum with his big game. One of the most – remember, he had a similar workout as Tariq Woolen coming out of the combine. He started to come into his own.
Yeah.
I thought they did a good job. Look, Amon-Ra St. Brown had a lot of catches. They had some big plays there. The Bucs defense did a much better job than most teams, I would say, kind of sitting on those intermediate routes that the Lions usually open up in that offense. They were sitting on them. McCollum did a great job breaking on them and breaking up some passes. Servachier Dennis deserves a shout-out. Linebacker that I loved in last year's draft, flying around making plays. And then Chris Godwin, 117 of the 185 receiving yards for the Bucs.
So much better this year than
leading the league in catches, I believe.
He just looks athletic and explosive again. It's like the last few years have been him running at 80%
completely
capacity.
Different player right now.
Yeah.
So, coming out of this, if you're a Lions fan, it's play better situational football. If you're a Bucs fan, you say, "Oh, we found a way to win, and we played better situational football against one of the best teams in the NFC." Impressive win. So they dominated the Commanders in Week 1. They win a tough one in Detroit in Week 2. Huge start here for the Bucs.
Yeah, absolutely. Incredible outcomes for them. Aiden Hutchinson is on pace for Defensive Player of the Year, only he hasn't faced a starter yet, which is certainly a big part of that. Aiden Hutchinson is an incredible player, but this sort of shows how damaging that is when you have to go to the backups on the offensive line. This was one of those games where he got 5 sacks, even though they were well aware of what was happening and dedicating a lot of extra
even
attention.
When they put Chipper next to him or whatever,
right?
He won and finished those plays.
So it just shows how hard that is for an offense to deal with when you're dealing with an elite player going up against a backup offensive lineman. He can still wreck your day, even with all the chip and extra attention you can throw that way. There's really no way of offsetting. He's just going to win every rep against that guy if you don't take care of that.
Further proof how dumb the half sack is. We saw the 5th sack. We saw him tackle the quarterback. The announcers are like, "We have 5 sacks for Aiden Hutchinson," and a couple minutes later they're like, "Oh no,
it's been downgraded.
We call it a half sack now. He didn't tackle the quarterback. Someone else tackled him with him. It's 4.5." He had 5 sacks, guys. Bucs rushed the passer pretty well too. Yaya Diaby and Vita Vea. Vea's banged up, MCL injury. We'll know more this week, but Vea had one of those games where he was really good. That doesn't always happen, but very good in this game. Credit the Bucs, man. Feisty, hard-nosed defense, winning the situational football and getting a lot of fumble luck when they made – because Baker fumbled in the red zone and in his own territory.
Right.
And they picked up both of them. That's a huge part of this game as well.
Yep.
All right, what's next here? The last 1 o'clock game. Las Vegas Raiders with the upset in Baltimore. What was the final here? 26-23. The Raiders barely even picked up a yard in the first half. They come back and win 26-23. Lots to talk about in this game, of course. Ravens fall to 0-2 for the first time since 2015.
Yeah, absurd Gardner Minshew interception late in the play, right to Marlon Humphrey. Jacorian Bennett had a nice pass breakup to save a huge pass to Nelson Aguilar. This was a game that Baltimore were absolutely dominating. And then somehow the Raiders came back into it and stole the game away at the end.
Yeah, the whole fourth quarter. First off, Brock Bowers had a huge game for the Raiders. He looked great. They fed him the ball everywhere. Davante Adams had 4 catches over 80 yards in the fourth quarter. There was a controversial pass interference penalty in the end zone. Brandon Stevens on Davante Adams. One of those just like a 9 route where they just kind of start hugging each other down the field. That happens a lot, and they called pass interference there. It was on 3rd and 17. Put the ball at the 1. Raiders punched it in. That was when they were down 7. That tied the game up. There's a lot of these.
I think that call was okay, to be honest.
You okay with it?
Yeah.
I'm just saying that ended up being like one of the biggest swings in the NFL this week. From a play standpoint.
People that hated that call were like, oh, it's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other, right? They're both hugging each other. They're both fighting for position. It's like, yeah, but the ball is over here and only one of them is trying to get to it.
Yeah.
Like that's the point, right? Pass interference is, are you physically impeding the other guy from getting to the football? It's not, are you making contact with the other guy? Only one of those players was physically impeding the other one from getting to the football. Davante Adams was trying to adjust to where that ball was thrown, and Brandon Stevens was preventing him from doing that. That's pass interference. So you can argue that, yeah, the throw location is the only thing that makes that pass interference, and I'm fine with that argument, but I think it is still pass interference.
I just want to talk about it from a Ravens perspective before giving the Raiders credit for winning the game.
Okay.
From a Ravens perspective, shades of 2022. Remember early Mike McDonald, defensive coordinator? Everybody was criticizing him for blowing 10-point fourth quarter leads. That happened.
Yeah.
Blew a 10-point fourth quarter lead here. Is this a Ravens thing? Like, just having some flashbacks from a couple years ago. But a couple of the ways that they, beat themselves. Up 16-6 in the third quarter. Robert Spillane steals an interception, right? Great play by Spillane.
Yeah.
So that kind of goes both ways. You got the defensive pass interference with about 4 minutes left in the game to put the ball at the 1 for the Raiders. Then when the Ravens have their game-winning drive attempt, Max Crosby, quick win off the edge. You get sacked right away behind the chains. Then Baltimore has a 24-yard punt plus a penalty that put the Raiders in Ravens territory at their own 43, at the Ravens 43, on the way to the game-winning drive, right? So from a Ravens perspective, you're like, man, all of these mistakes are a big part of the loss. And then from a Raiders perspective, for the second straight week, they've got no run game. They are last in the league in rushing yards with 100. They have 2 rushing first downs, 2.4 yards per carry. All the more reason to actually be like, wow, impressive by Gardner Minshew and Brock Bowers and Davante Adams to put this all on their shoulders and put up enough points and make this comeback in the second half.
Those Zamir White to lead the league in rushing tickets aren't looking
Is that
great.
what you were smirking about? Yeah. Zamir White not going to lead the league in rushing. I mean, if this was a rookie quarterback or any other quarterback, you'd be like, man, he's just got no help. He's got no run game. It's atrocious for the Raiders. They're worse. They're losing over a half a point per handoff.
That's
basically
crazy.
The EPA per play. That's how bad the Raiders' run game has been. But they're sitting here at 1-1. And again, I want to give credit to Minshew and Bowers and Adams because they just kind of took over this game in the second half.
Yeah, that's the thing. I feel like Minshew has, maybe just in this game, but he understood, you know what, Davante Adams is still amazing. Brock Bowers is basically uncoverable as a tight end. Why don't I just throw the ball to those 2 guys all of the time? Because that's literally the Ravens absolutely could not stop Brock Bowers on anything underneath. They had nobody that could match up with him, and literally every time they threw the ball his way, he caught it. Meanwhile, Adams, not only was he drawing pass interference on those plays, but he was just really good. Phenomenal. One of the best sideline toe drag swag plays you're ever going to see. Genuine poster type of stuff where he's almost horizontal, just gets both toes down on the turf while he's way over the sideline making the catch.
Unbelievable.
I mean, this was as good as Davante Adams has looked in years, and I think he probably still had this there the whole way. It's just he didn't have quarterbacks that were taking advantage of it. Minshew, whether or not it was an epiphany in this game or something he's going to take going forward, but he understood, I have 2 players they can't cover. I'm just going to throw the ball to them all the time, and it ended up paying dividends enough to win.
Yeah, they combined for, most of the yards.
most of the yards.
Can't do math on the fly here.
Over 200 of
a little over
276.
200 of the 276. Very impressive. They move Bowers all over the place. He's caught so far. He's tied for 5th in the league with 8 first downs through 2 weeks. Caught 15 of his 16 targets. He had caught all 9 of his targets for 98 yards, and all in different alignments, right?
Yeah.
They're running him up the seam. It's a scramble drill. It's a little screen. It's a little dump off. They're using Bowers the way you're supposed to use Bowers, which is great.
Yep. The last thing I just wanted to hit on this game, the Ravens, right at the death, they got themselves into Hail Mary range. And instead of running the Hail Mary, they ran a quarterback draw with Lamar Jackson at quarterback. And remember years ago where the Chiefs, instead of taking a Hail Mary attempt, threw like this shallow crosser to Tyreek Hill, and he just ran through the entire Dallas defense and scored? Lamar Jackson is maybe the one other player in the NFL. I mean, Devontae Adams during the week said he was literally the best ball carrier in NFL history. The best person with the ball in his hands the game has ever seen, Lamar Jackson. So I actually don't hate that as a play, to run the draw into acres of space. And just curiously, he got halfway maybe into where he needed to get to, and then started the whole, pitchy woo-woo play, started like lateral it away. Why? There were like 2 guys in front of him with a reasonable amount of space, one of which had a blocker vaguely near him, and Lamar chooses to pitch it away. There's literally, other than Tyreek Hill, nobody else in the NFL I would want with the ball in his hands in that situation with that picture in front of him, and I needed him to get into the end zone. Like, I want Tyreek or Lamar with that football. The Ravens had that, and Lamar chose to pitch it away instead, and from that point on, it was never going to work. I kind of wonder why he didn't just back himself and give it a shot.
When Tyreek did that, I mean, it was unbelievable to see. But you only had to beat 2 people, right? Because you kind of have like everybody's like stacked up at the goal line, and it's not like little kids soccer where all 11 players are just going to swarm to the ball. There'll be like 2 people, right? So you draw them in, and then
like I sent you the screenshot. There's
Yeah.
quite a wide amount of space. There's one guy in the middle of the field. There's another guy to his left where there's a blocker. He can set that up, and then there's somebody else out of shot over to the left. But that gives him a lot of space with
He'd be the one guy that might be able to pull it off.
right. And that's right at the moment where he's like, it's time to pitch this away. I don't know.
As it unfolded, I thought, wow, they have got a pretty good
shot at this
rugby-ish plan.
Yeah.
But I didn't see the path
lane
that he had. Yeah. Maybe we'll talk on Wednesday about panic time for the Ravens at 0-2, and maybe we thought they might be a little disappointed coming off the Chiefs win. I don't think they played that way, or the Chiefs loss. But man, when you fall to 0-2 here,
tough spot. Yeah.
it is a tough spot. All right, before we get to the 4 o'clock games, if you love showcasing your NFL knowledge with some skin in the game, Locker is a must-have in your gaming arsenal. Locker contests combine the strategic elements of DFS with the thrill of sports betting into an exciting new game format. Simple to enter and easy to learn, Locker contests allow users to test their wits by answering questions in real time during live NFL games, with the goal being to accurately predict the upcoming action on the field. By correctly answering straightforward, game-based, multiple-choice questions such as which Falcons player will have the most receiving yards on the next drive, or what will be the results of the Eagles' next drive, users can earn points and move up the leaderboard in pursuit of cash prizes. Locker offers both free-to-play games with cash jackpots as well as a variety of real money contests featuring different types of payout structures, including top-heavy contests and 50-50 contests. There are contests for every NFL game on the 2024 schedule, so users can pick and choose when to play, whether it's all the primetime games, strictly the games of your favorite team, or any other combination of your choice. Many contests are hosted by Locker's expansive partner network of athletes, celebrities, and influencers, and with chat functionality embedded directly in the app, users can directly engage with the contest host as well as other participants. This dynamic and integrated social experience allows users to celebrate wins, lament bad beats, and talk smack as the action heats up and the game plays out. If you sign up for Locker through 33rd Team, use code 33rd, and you'll get a $50 deposit match. Join today and discover an entirely new and unique way to cash in on your NFL viewing experience. Again, code is 33rd over at Locker, $50 deposit match. Come join Sam and I as we come and play alongside. All right, 4 o'clock games. Arizona Cardinals, dominant win, 41-10 over the Los Angeles Rams. Cardinals move to 1-1. Rams fall to 0-2. Kyler Murray finishes 17 of 21 for 266 and 3 scores. Perhaps more importantly, Marvin Harrison Jr. showed up and played and in a big way. 4 catches for $130, 2 touchdowns, and right off the bat, tried to answer some of the questions that we had coming out of a very quiet week 1.
Yeah, it was almost like this. Sometimes it feels like the NFL is answering whatever the narrative was previously. It was almost like they were specifically out here to remind people that the best wide receiver prospect to come along in years is actually pretty good.
I actually love that about football, is that you have a week of build-up. You can actually scheme things up. You can actually say, we're going to prove to you that Marvin Harrison Jr. is good. Or we're just going to, not that they're doing that, but we're going to game plan in a way that uses his skills. Hits a deep post early, and then a scramble drill, 60-yarder. Kyler Murray, by every single measure, with one of the better games in recent history, just from a PFF standpoint, that'll be the case. From a QBR standpoint, that'll be the case. From an EPA standpoint, however you want to measure it, perfect passer rating, plus 59 rushing yards. I think that's the first time that's been done since 1974 for Kyler Murray. Everything about Arizona's offense was absolutely dominant.
Yeah, it really was. They were absolutely fantastic. Murray looks incredible. I mean, this is as good as he's ever played in the NFL. And remember, as good as he's ever played in the NFL is a pretty high bar. Like, the last couple of years with injury haven't been great, but Kyler Murray in his past has led the NFL in big-time throw rate. Like, this is a guy capable of genuinely spectacular play, and he looks like he's playing as well as he's ever played right now. Marvin Harrison, so it was an interesting game by him. It looked early that he was going to, break records. Like, he was the second leading receiver in the NFL after, the first few minutes of this game. Then nothing else for the rest of the game. Now, there were some targets in there, but he didn't increase that production. But the first play, he just cooked Tre'Davious White. And based off the last 2 weeks, Tre'Davious White may be done. That was rough from him. Remember, he got barbecued week 1 as well. The second one was a really nice adjustment where he's sort of running a deep over and then realizes, this play is not going to work where I'm running to, adjust deep, and Murray sees him, hits him over the top. Amazing dive to turn that into a touchdown.
I thought he looked fast on that play when he turned on the jet. It's just a long stride.
And then there was a really nice contested catch, kind of back shoulder thing. I think him and Kyler are not on the same page yet with those back shoulder plays. That one wasn't the greatest location in the world. Harrison won it, just took it away from the defensive back. But remember week 1, one of the misses was a miscommunication on the back shoulder.
Yeah.
There were a couple later in this game where they weren't quite where they needed to be. They're just not there yet in terms of being in sync on those. But obviously, it showed he can play at this level.
Two different things here. So I thought from a Rams perspective, their defensive tackles, their defensive line just got moved. Other than Jared Verse, by the way, through 2 weeks, Jared Verse
is really good,
looking very good for the Rams. But Kobe Turner and company, they got moved. So Arizona's offensive line played really well up front. Again, everything Arizona did offensively seemed to work. The one positive I would say for the Rams was Kyler had just indefensible plays.
Yeah.
Scramble plays. He, threw one up to Trey McBride in double coverage, which was up and away, in a spot where only he could catch it. There were some indefensible plays there. So it was from a Rams perspective, it was almost, it's not as bad as it seems, but it was, it's kind of both. But they're also in this potential spiral here. Cooper Kupp comes out injured.
Everybody hurt.
Puka Nakua's already hurt. They've already got this turnover on the offensive line. Stafford's sacked 5 times. Unfortunately, Cooper Kupp is at that point in his career where every time he does something good, I'm worried that he's going to get hurt.
Yeah.
Every time he makes a move or creates a big play, I'm worried. But he left the locker room with a walking boot, so got to keep an eye on Cooper Kupp. And again, just from an Arizona perspective, James Conner ran well, offensive line, Kyler playing well, Marvin Harrison Jr., Trey McBride still being a monster as a tight end. Maybe I've underrated your Cardinals here this offseason, Sam.
Their offense just looks really, really good. It's going to be incredibly dangerous to deal with. This was not a close game. They got up early, they got up big, and the Rams never really showed any signs of getting back into it, albeit with, injuries just mounting up. Kyron Williams at one point was basically the only player they had remaining. Then Kyron Williams comes out of the game. Somehow Matthew Stafford was still left in there. But this also, by the way, this snapped a 9 straight sequence of the Rams winning in Arizona.
Really?
Yeah.
It's a different Cardinals team, man. Kyler looks as healthy. I mean, he looks the best he looks in years since that 21 season. That was one of my questions coming into the year. Will he ever get back to that? He looks like he's back to it.
Yep.
And from just a pure athleticism and movement perspective, I mean, night and day, I think, compared to last year, right? He's got those little scamper and run around plays when he needs them, right? When the times the other quarterbacks, we say, don't do that. With Kyler, you say, it's okay. He can do it because he creates off of those, and he's doing that right now, including making those big-time throws from the pocket as well. That makes Arizona extremely dangerous.
Yeah, I mean, Kyler Murray at his best is in that category of quarterbacks where you don't have an answer to everything he can do, and the Rams didn't. Like he played at that kind of level in this game, and that makes them incredibly difficult to deal with.
And then shout out to Dennis the Barbarian Gardeck.
The Barbarian.
With 3 sacks and an unofficial 92 PFF pass rush grade. It won't change much from that, though, because he had a couple big plays in there.
Well, that was a question coming into the game, right? The Cardinals don't really have a pass rush, but the Rams were down to multiple backup offensive linemen.
And he was the only guy that really got home. But
yeah, and you're like, is that enough for the Cardinals pass rush to actually look good? And it was. Like, the Barbarian had a monster game. Zaven Collins had a really nice sack, but that was basically all he did in the game. But yeah, the Barbarian, he's going to end up with such a weird career where he's going to have, like, whatever amount of sacks he ends up is going to have come in, like, 3 games.
Multi-sack games.
Yeah.
That's what the Barbarian likes to get. Good for the Cardinals, moving to 1-1. Rams 0-2. Again, maybe a Wednesday discussion as we talk about some 0-2 teams, but feels like that 22 season where everybody was hurt and things are not going well for the Rams.
Ben Allen in the chat points out that Marvin Harrison topped 20 miles an hour on that second touchdown, which is faster than a hippo. So
He's faster than
progressing.
Okay. Geno hit over 20 on his. In case nobody's realized, if you run 40 or more yards,
Yeah.
most NFL players are probably going to hit 20.
Most. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's more of a function of distance.
Still, he did that in the first week and didn't top 20.
Yeah, but he didn't have a reason to. This time he running away from people. Anyway, we've got enough of that game. Pittsburgh Steelers 13, Denver Broncos 6. Steelers move to 2-0. Justin Fields era, undefeated. Broncos fall to 0-2.
Yeah. Did Justin Fields just win the job? Is this now the Fields era in Pittsburgh? Is Russ getting it back?
They're averaging 15.5 points a game.
Whatever.
So
Another game, though, where I thought Fields played pretty well.
I agree. I'm not diminishing the Fields era here. I do believe I would roll with him because he's playing pretty clean football and they're playing great defense.
Yeah, and that's the thing.
And
like,
maybe there's some Bo Nix issues.
Maybe there definitely appear to be some Bo Nix issues. Another game, this one, though, Justin Fields actually targeted the middle of the field a bit. It wasn't the baseball pitching image.
We threw some strikes.
Right. We did.
We mixed in some strikes.
We got at least 4 strikes into this pitching match.
No, I mean, historically, they probably got hit, but it's fine.
Whatever. We got some strikes in there from Justin Fields, so that's an important development in the right direction. But, yeah, this was some good passing from Justin Fields. Now, look, with the caveat that, he had 117 passing yards, so it's not like it lit the world on fire. But part of that was
they have 8 field goals and 1 touchdown through 2 games here.
Right, but also he had 72 yards that were nullified by penalties. Like the Steelers' offense seemed to be on a relentless mission to self-sabotage, including an absolute dime to George Pickens over. Like, what I really liked is that he was perfectly prepared to go after Patrick Surtain even knowing how good he is, because he saw single coverage with George Pickens, his number one guy. I don't care if it's Surtain covering him. I'm going to take a shot. And he got it in there. Like, he was actually hitting his number one receiver against an elite corner, and then the Steelers just kept hitting penalties and taking away those plays. Pickens in particular, he had a touchdown taken away on a pretty weak offensive pass interference call in this game. He had that bomb over Surtain taken away.
The Fields one kind of goes both ways, because he breaks the one to Pickens that got negated, 30 would have been a 51-yarder.
Yeah.
He breaks a clean pocket. This is like the downside of when you want to scramble out. He breaks out of a clean pocket. The tackle's got the guy blocked. Was it Broderick Jones?
Yeah.
And he just kind of tugs him because he loses leverage, right? So it's kind of like you're putting that pressure, you're putting unneeded pressure on the offensive line, even though you rolled out and made a great play.
Yeah. There's also a point, though, where you, as
Like
an
it's still the
offensive
tackle's
lineman.
fault, but like the QB also puts him in that
I
situation.
know, but also as an offensive lineman, at some point you probably have to be more cognizant of who your quarterback is. Like if your quarterback is a pocket passing statue, when those plays happen, I think it's entirely understandable for the offensive lineman to be taken by surprise by the shift in trajectory from the pass rusher, and it's not really your fault. When your quarterback is Justin Fields, you kind of need to be aware that this is a fairly regular occurrence, and you need to be ready for your pass rusher to suddenly dramatically change course and let the hell go of him, because it's going to happen all the time.
No, I get it. But I'm just saying, the scrambling from a clean pocket already it just stresses the line more, whether they know that or not. Second straight game where Bo Nix struggled throwing the ball down the field. He did end up with a couple big plays. As soon as he did connect on a couple plays down the field, because he had 90 yards on 3 completions on 10-plus yard throws. Horrible red zone interception.
Yeah,
for
awful.
Bo Nix.
Just didn't see the guy he was leading him into.
But he finished 3 of 11 for 90 yards on 10-plus yard throws, including 2 interceptions. So through 2 weeks, our old friend Austin Gale had a bunch of numbers where Bo Nix is historically bad throwing the ball at 5-plus yards, 10-plus yards, however you want to slice it through 2 weeks. Now, again, early in the season, the Steelers' defense might just be outstanding, or they may have run into a recovering Achilles injured Kirk Cousins and rookie Bo Nix. And so it's same thing with like the Seahawks. Like the Seahawks could be outstanding, or they had Bo Nix and Jacoby Brissett through 2 weeks. So we'll learn more. But through 2 weeks, impressive Steelers defense and just some massive questions about the Broncos' ability to sustain offense and do anything beyond 5 to 10 yards.
Yeah, absolutely. Bo Nix does not look good at all. That was a terrible interception.
They also can't run the ball either.
Yeah, nothing's working for them at the moment. The other thing I wanted to mention with Fields, by the way, is the Vance Joseph blitzed the crap out of him. Like he was blitzed 59% of the time in his dropbacks, and he actually did well in those plays. Like Justin Fields is the time we saw this with Caleb Williams a bit.
Yeah.
Like there are types of players where you absolutely want to blitz the hell out of them because they don't tend to react well to that. Fields did well when he was blitzed, and that I think is a pretty important development for this offense if it is going to be Fields a quarterback going forward. He's shown that you can't necessarily just get crazy aggressive and go after him because he's going to make enough plays to negate that.
Second straight game for the Steelers, you got pass rush help from a lot of different people. TJ Watt with another sack. Alex Highsmith had a dominant sack and 4 other pressures. Cam Hayward finishes with 6 pressures. Keanu Benton creating some havoc up front. If they all stay healthy, this looks like a really good defensive front. Over the last couple of years, we've seen some injury issues. Hayward, regressing a little bit before getting hurt last year. When they're all on the field, that does create some havoc against opposing offenses.
Yep.
I would still roll with Fields, I think. I would still roll with Fields.
He's showing enough that I don't see a huge point in going away from him at this point. Like, he's doing as much as he can, I think, to earn this job, and there's more upside to him.
All right, let's go. Kansas City Chiefs 26, Bengals 25. Chiefs move to 2-0. Bengals fall to 0-2. We had a 4th and 16. 2 big flags at the end here. It was 4th and 6. Chiefs they're down 2, trying to get into field goal range for a game-winning opportunity. There's a 4th and 6 negated by a Chiefs penalty, 4th and 6 conversion. It goes to 4th and 16, and then Mahomes kind of throws one up on 4th and 16. We have a pass interference penalty that puts the Chiefs into field goal range. A couple runs later, Harrison Butker kicks the game-winning field goal. Chiefs win 26-25. They pull it off once again.
Matt Edwards on Twitter says, in the 5 games Burrow and Mahomes have gone head-to-head, the game has been decided on the final play 4 times. So 4 out of the 5, it's gone down to literally the last play of the game.
And how many of those before the final play was there
was a penalty?
Bengals penalty? There's a Joseph Asai late hit, Dijon Anthony yesterday with the pass interference penalty. I hate watching games finish on penalties, but like this looked like pass interference to me.
So I'm kind of torn on this play. He definitely gets there very early and jumps through the back of the receiver. So if you had just those two pieces of information, you're like, this is a stonewall
You'd
pass
say, I'm
interference
right. It's
penalty.
pass
Right,
interference.
it's a clear penalty. However, it's a prayer lofted up into the air. The receiver is backing into the DB. And at some point, the DB has rights to that football, right? Like he's not trying to. There are plays where the DB is like running through the receiver and he's there to like basically, like he's just trying to hit the guy to stop him catching the ball. Here, I think he's actually going for the interception, at which point he's jumping towards the football and there's a guy backing up into his space. Like at some point, don't you have the right to that air space and the right to actually try and catch it yourself? And you have a better position to catch it than he does because you're attacking it from the correct angle. Like, I don't know. I get it. I'm not like, it's obviously going to get called because he gets there early and hits the guy. And, you know, it's just an obvious play that's always going to get called. I do, however, think that within the rules, there's a fair argument to be made that, like, he sort of has rights to that airspace. And how is he supposed to catch that pass if he can't, like, bump the guy who's backing up into him on the way?
Yeah. I mean, it's another game where the Chiefs are good because they did it defensively, man. They scored a defensive touchdown to turn this thing around. Chiefs are good, and they, you know, kind of get lucky as well, all at the same time. Saw our friend Joe Goodberry tweet out that the Bengals have given up 275 passing yards through 2 games. They're 0-2.
Right.
Held Mahomes to 18 of 25 for 151, plus 2 interceptions, one other interception that was negated on a defensive hold on the other side of the field. So really threw the ball into coverage 3 times. One of the more amazing interceptions you'll see, Cam Taylor-Britt.
Phenomenal.
Did the Odell Beckham. You know my theory on that?
What?
All these players were, I mean, that was 10 years ago, right? The OBJ play. They were either teenagers or, you know, young players or young kids. They see OBJ do something that barely anyone's ever done, maybe no one's ever done, and they start practicing those things. You start to see it way more and more.
Yeah.
They've been practicing this OBJ. Like, people practice these crazy one-handed catches more and more because of OBJ and that one catch that he made on Sunday Night Football. But incredible play by Cam Taylor.
Phenomenal play. And him off the back of the trash talk that you told him not to do. Now, he got toasted earlier in the game.
They lost.
They did. They lost. He also got toasted earlier in the game by Rashee Rice.
By the way, Mahomes, as great as Mahomes is, and what he very rarely does he hit the top of his drop and hit an in-rhythm go ball.
Yeah.
This is one of the very few top-of-the-drop in-rhythm go balls that he hits, put it right on Rashee Rice. And Rashee Rice isn't normally a downfield threat. That was a beautiful play by the Chiefs.
And it needed to be accurate because Britt, I don't think, was really anticipating the throw getting to exactly where it needed to be. He was sort of there if it had been slightly underthrown, but it wasn't. But the thing that made that interception so great is it did come against Xavier Worthy, the guy that he said, yeah, he can run fast in a straight line, but that's about it. Well, he tried to run fast in a straight line. Taylor Britt ran with him and had hands on him and then made the interception. We also have breaking news that Isaiah Pacheco, who left the game injured and left the stadium in a walking boot and crutches, according to Ian Rappaport, has fractured his fibula based off initial tests. So he's going to be down for a little bit of time.
He's set to miss time. More information about the severity, but yeah, he got rolled up on pretty badly.
Yeah.
And look, the Chiefs ran the ball. They ran for 149 and threw for 151. So Pacheco had 19 carries for 90 yards. Did his things, you know, keeping the offense on schedule.
So the thing I wanted to say before we were talking about the Cam Taylor-Britt interception is that, okay, they lost, but the Bengals were able to snap out of the malaise from week 1. Like, they were terrible in the opening week. They were good in this game. They just came up one play short against Kansas City.
They were. I mean, it's still, if you're looking at that offense, the tight ends had 14 catches for 151 yards, split across 3 different tight ends.
And Gesicki made a difference. Like,
Mike Gesicki did make a difference.
Absolutely changed that offense, or has changed that offense.
Eric All, the rookie tight end, Drew Sample, like they were thrown to the tight ends. Jamar Chase was still just kind of an underneath threat. I'd still rather see him.
But he was getting the Bill Belichick defensive game plan treatment, right? Every single play he was getting double covered or bracket covered. Like, they were taking him away. So anytime that happens, the question becomes to the offense, okay, who can win the one-on-one opportunity on the other side of the field. And Andre Yosivas won that a couple of times in the end zone in particular. So a couple of touchdowns for him. Didn't do it every single play, like had some plays where he didn't win his rep, but he showed up for a couple of plays. The tight ends, as you said, were winning. Gesicki in particular, I think, made some really nice plays. Your guy, Jermaine Burton, can he run a go route? Yeah, turns out he can do that at least.
For 47 yards, wide open.
So they had enough guys winning the one-on-one rep away from Jamar Chase, and I'm sure Chase being taken away the way he was contributed to him losing his mind late in the game just out of frustration. Yeah. Like, he spent a whole game effectively being taken away by scheme. That's annoying as hell as a receiver. You're just not – you are a factor in the game, but not the way you want to be.
Yeah, I mean, that didn't end up costing them because they still kicked that field goal. But it was one of the – it just shows you have to play how mistake-free you have to play to beat the Chiefs. It was a gutsy performance, I thought, for the Bengals. They kept getting depleted. They were depleted on the defensive line. Defensive tackles getting hurt left and right. They were getting run on a little bit, but they forced Mahomes into a bunch of mistakes. Mm-hmm. Did a really nice job there. Trey Hendrickson was unbelievable.
Huge game.
Now, he got Kingsley Suamataia benched for Wanye Morris because he kept it was holding penalties, hands to the face, and sacks.
Yeah.
Hendrickson just winning over and over and over again. The Bengals still need other people to win up front, but Hendrickson, outstanding job. They bring in Wanye Morris, and Morris might end up starting for the Chiefs next week at left tackle. Suamataia has struggled his first 2 weeks. But the Burrow fumble, the fumble 6. Remember, the Chiefs defense does it again because the offense only scored 19, 20 points, whatever it was. Burrow had a bunch of plays where he tried to step through the pocket, whether it was warranted or not. He tried to step through the pocket and kept getting either sacked or just not scrambling away. And this was one of those. He ends up fumbling. Chiefs take it to the house, and that ended up being obviously one of the big differences in the game.
It's tough because, like, on the one hand, you look at this and say Cincinnati was missing a lot of players. You know, no T. Higgins, half the defensive line is down. Like, they missed a lot of guys. They forced Mahomes into more mistakes than he's made in pretty much any other game, maybe ever. And they were a play away from winning this game. Could have, should have won it, maybe. On the other hand, they did lose it. That puts them in a hole now. And, like, you know, so it's kind of hard to take too many positives out of this.
Yeah.
But they did snap out of week. Like, if you
start 0-2 every year, though.
Yeah, but if they played the way they did week 1, they would have been wrecked by Kansas City. Instead, they absolutely snapped out of it and did as good a job against Kansas City as anybody does again. And it was just not quite enough.
Yeah, I mean, Kansas City was moving the ball pretty well until the end too, and they when they weren't turning it over. Like, that sounds weird. When they weren't turning it over, they moved the ball pretty well. They didn't get Xavier Worthy involved in this game nearly as much. They put the ball in his hands in space, wasn't able to create the same big plays that he did in week 1. The one other thing I wanted to highlight, Cincinnati had one of those. They kept failing on the goal line. And, you know, they had it first and goal, like inches to go.
Right.
And they moved, and they lost yardage, and they had 4th and goal from the 3 after like multiple horrendous plays on the goal line. One of those where the announcers, the coaches generally think, "Oh, we'll just kick the field goal because our goal line offense is terrible." They went for it, and Yosivas was open in the end zone for his second touchdown. It was a huge play, a huge call by Zach Taylor not to let the quote-unquote momentum or the results of the last few plays to just make him take the points. You know you have to be aggressive with Kansas City, and that field goals aren't going to make it work. Now, that put them up 5, and then they missed the extra point.
Yeah.
To go up 6. And obviously they lost by 1. Things would have changed, whatever. But that was a huge play as well. Missing the extra point, and perhaps they should have gone for 2 at that point too, because they were up 5 to go for 2 to try to get up 7. Some weird play calling there, I would say.
Chekhov's extra point. Strikes again.
Strikes again. So the Chiefs do it again. They strike 2-0. Spags also had one of those Spags plays, right? Romo does a good job of kind of highlighting that. It was, 3rd down. They know when to blitz. They know when they're going to mess up your protection. They get the extra rusher there. Big sack on Joe Burrow to get the ball back into Kansas City's hands to create the game-winning drive. Bengals defense is holding, and then it's the defensive pass interference that makes the difference.
Yep.
So I hate seeing the games end on penalties. By the way, throw the ball to Jermaine Burton more. He's averaging 47 yards per reception in his NFL career.
And he firmly answered the question, I don't care how much of the playbook do you know. Do you know how to run a 9 route? The answer is yes. Yes, he does. And when he does, he can get you a 40-yard play. So let's do that more.
Can you do it twice a game now? Can we do it 2 times in a game? He's uncoverable down the field. Chiefs move to 2-0, and Bengals are 0-2 because that's what they do.
Yeah.
Sunday Night Football, Houston Texans 19, Chicago Bears 13. Texans move to 2-0 on the season. Bears fall to 1-1.
Yeah.
Kind of an ugly game, huh?
It was.
Caleb Williams finishes 23 of 37 for just 174. It's 4.7 yards per attempt. Also sacked 7 times, throws 2 picks.
Yeah.
And 1 negated interception.
So it was funny because certainly early in the game, it looked like Caleb Williams had settled down really well from last week. Last week it was too frenetic, too over the top, and you're like, just dial it back, ease into the game. Last week should show you that you don't need to make all the plays. Your team's pretty good. And early it looked like that had happened, and then the Texans were just like, well, why don't we just blitz and stunt all the time? And that just created so much havoc for the Chicago offense that Caleb couldn't any longer play calmly, neatly in the pocket and just, the way he was earlier, and had to play Caleb Williams style and just wasn't able to make enough plays in the face of overwhelming pressure.
Yeah, a couple plays with Caleb Williams. My concern with him is, from what I've seen, and look, I reacted to the preseason.
Yeah.
I reacted to the special plays that we saw in the preseason, even against Bengals third stringers. I reacted to it, and I assumed a lot of that would carry over to the NFL. And then you always get it's the preseason. These guys are going to be truckers in a week, or they're going to be tax accountants and what have you. And maybe those people are right so far. That the special from Caleb Williams, moving around the pocket, when he scrambles out, right? When he scrambles out and you get all those Mahomes comps and Josh Allen comps and Aaron Rodgers, like he scrambles out and he makes a throw and then he throws a pick or he misses a pass. I think I'm most concerned with Caleb Williams through 2 weeks is when the special stuff is either just a step slower than it needs to be rather than a step faster than everyone else, or his accuracy is just way off.
Yeah.
I'm actually surprised with how inaccurate he's been through 2 weeks.
I think that don't you think that it feels like that's somewhat of a product of young quarterback playing the game at 1,000,000 miles an hour in his brain. Like, I feel like accuracy is something, because remember we had this.
I'm sensing some of that. Yeah.
We had this with Baker Mayfield as well. Like, one of the most accurate quarterbacks the college game had ever seen. You're like, the one thing we know about Baker Mayfield is that guy has pinpoint ball location accuracy. And early in his career, he didn't at all. Baker's accuracy completely deserted him. You're like, what? I don't understand that. We'd always question accuracy of, can you go from inaccurate to accurate? We'd never really thought about what happens when an accurate guy stops being accurate with the football. Not like, the depth of target or whatever is influencing this. Just same pass is no longer within the same location that it used to be. I think there's a lot of young quarterback and everything else affecting that in a way that you don't usually think it would. I think that's a part of what we were dealing with here. The Bears have serious protection issues, and I don't know how much of it is the offensive line as opposed to Caleb and all those kinds of things. I don't know how much responsibility Caleb has for the protections. I think at one point I definitely heard him adjusting a protection. So in the game, Houston ran stunts on 12 dropbacks. Of 12 dropbacks, do you want to know how many passing yards Caleb created?
Is it similar to I have his blitz numbers against the blitz. Is it like 10?
Yes, it's 15. Would you like to know what his passer rating was when the Texans ran a stunt?
0.
2.8, because he had an interception in there as well.
Is it the same? Is the blitz numbers, because they
are similar? Yeah, they combined a lot of them. Right.
Exchange. Against blitzes, he was 3 for 9 for 15 yards.
Yeah.
With a pick, 4 sacks.
Right.
And then 3 scrambles. He also had 2 other incompletions and a negated interception.
So this is 2 for 6 for 15 yards, the interception, 4 sacks. And it's the same kind of thing. But the point being, like, it was like the Bears had never encountered a blitz or stunts before, right?
Yeah.
And these are not, okay, there were some pressure looks that were not the easiest thing in the world to diagnose, but this was not the most complicated defensive scheme or pressure package that's ever been thrown at an offense. And yet it felt like, I tweeted this last night, this was like, remember when Miami showed up with the Wildcat and the Patriots were like, what the hell is this? And just completely shit the bed for that game and got destroyed by it. Well, this was like this, except we've seen this every game for the last 60 years, right? Stunts and blitzes. Like, this is a routine defense that was thrown at them, and Chicago's offense acted like this was a completely new development that they'd never encountered before.
I was getting, I was feeling the heat. I was feeling the pressure just watching the Texans crowd the line of scrimmage and create just enough indecision in the Bears and the protection scheme and in Caleb Williams. Whatever they did, putting 5 and 6 up on the line of scrimmage was kryptonite for the Bears last night for sure.
And if you look, I don't think the Chicago offensive line, it's not going to grade well, but it's not going to grade catastrophically badly either, because a lot of the breakdown was a protectional breakdown, like a systemic breakdown rather than an individual breakdown. Guys are getting beat. They can't pick things up yet.
Same thing from a Texans pass rush point of view. Donnell Hunter had a bunch of one-on-one wins, but a lot of Donnell Hunter had 7 pressures, Will Anderson with 7, Mario Edwards Jr. with 5. A lot of those were Williams holding the ball long, free rushers, whatever it might be. The Texans, this is what I was talking about before the season, what their defense is capable of. I still think they can have a really explosive offense, and they put up points in week 1. But we still haven't even seen what this passing attack is capable of yet. We haven't had to. They ran the ball like crazy in week 1 and still put points up on the board. In this game, couldn't run the ball as much. They made a few big plays in the passing attack, but it was a defense-centric game. The Texans can win in multiple ways. That's why they're a Super Bowl contender, is because they can have games like this. And look, I know it's Caleb Williams. It's his second career start, but the Texans have Derek Stingley with a pick. They've got the players on the back end. They've got the pass rushers. They've got the scheme defensively to cause problems. In addition to, I think offensively, any given week, they can win any style of game. And that's why the Texans are 2-0 and maybe the team that can compete with the Chiefs and make a Super Bowl run.
Yeah, both sides of the ball look great. Nico Collins looks phenomenal as a wide receiver. CJ Stroud, I thought, looked fantastic again. And again, like, a lot of his best plays are coming outside of structure. The thing that was the question mark for him coming into the NFL, his grade, I don't think at PFF will be phenomenal because of that Kyler Gordon interception that wasn't. Like, that's a bad turnover-worthy play. That could and maybe should have been a pick 6. That'll count against him pretty heavily, even if it didn't end up counting on the stat sheet.
Misread that.
But outside of that, he was basically fantastic.
Did you hear what Chris said on the broadcast last night about how he watches the Georgia game often?
Good.
It was I forget who. Oh, he was Denzel Perryman was telling him, like, I watch all my highlights or whatever. So Stroud goes back to the Georgia game.
This is me.
To watch his best highlights just for confidence building. Which I
it's
think is
working.
Awesome. Yeah.
If he's convinced himself that he is CJ Stroud in the Georgia game all the time, it's one of the greatest acts of self-governance and manifestation that's ever happened.
Can somebody fire up Bryce Young's comeback against Auburn a couple years ago, get his confidence back?
Just with the Clockwork Orange thing with the eyes being forced open. Watch this for the next week.
I watch my highlight reels too, CJ. I go back on YouTube, watch myself striking out former major leaguers just to build confidence before every show here. That's what I do to get ready. Look, the Bears hung tough too. Their defense did a really nice job, forced a fumble at the end to give them an opportunity to try to make a game-winning drive.
Yeah.
Bears defense has been kind of carried over what they did late last year.
Yeah, their D was great. And I honestly think there's an argument that Kyler Gordon pick was actually still an interception. I know it touched the ground multiple times. I'm not 100% convinced he ever lost control of that football. And that's a game-changing play if he makes it.
I thought that was a bad challenge, though. The first challenge.
I get that one. The first challenge was awful.
Dell catch.
Diggs, wasn't it?
I'm sorry, Diggs. That was right in front of them.
Yeah.
As you showed.
That was terrible. That was an awful challenge.
Everybody's just, I don't know, something happened in the communication, though. It's not like Eberflus is just
Somebody
like going
tweeted-
rogue, like, oh, I saw it, I'm going to throw. Like, it's always going to be communicated from the top down.
Somebody tweeted that he basically used that as a lengthy timeout to just stall Houston's momentum. Like, rather than calling a timeout, I'm going to challenge the play. It'll take him a couple of minutes to work through it. It's just a timeout. It's like the basketball thing. You know, like,
but it's not the
momentum's
NBA.
gone against us. Kill it.
It's not the NBA where you have
Whatever. The point is,
7 timeouts.
That's by far the most like charitable explanation for that challenge, because otherwise it was ridiculous. The second one I think was I don't hate that challenge. I think that was a debatable. I understand that we're in this world where if it touches the ground, they're going to say it's incomplete. But remember, they kind of re-emphasized a couple of years ago, the ball can hit the ground as long as you have control of it.
Hand and control, yeah.
The first time, I think he had one hand under it. The second time, he had it pinned against his shoulder. I don't think he ever lost control of that. I think that was okay to challenge the second one because that's a game-changing play. That's a pick six if they let it stand. So I think that was worth taking a swing at.
Joe Mixon banged up in this game. Ankle injury. I think that's something to keep an eye on.
Yeah.
He wasn't as effective as he was in week 1. Cam Akers had that fumble in there as well. So just something to keep an eye on. Again, I think the Texans offense is better when they have Mixon and they have more of a running attack.
Yep.
Are we doing the
No, because it's 9:45 and we got a hard
9:45?
out.
We got a hard out. We got to go. All right, well, that's it. That's all 16 games, 15 games. We got one more tonight, Monday Night Football, Eagles and Falcons. All right, let's hit the subscribe button, hit the thumbs up. Thanks to everybody for tuning in. We'll see you again on Wednesday with more Check the Mic.